The villa was engulfed in flames with dead bodies lying scattered everywhere. A man with purple hair wielding a sword was followed by two others charging forward. He shouted loudly, "You scum mercenaries of Tylene, you're still alive, huh?" He commanded the two behind him, "Crush them!" A silver sword flashed, adorned with a blue stone on its blade. In less than a second, Raven used that sword to slice through three members of the purple-haired team. He quickly maneuvered through the sea of fire, thinking as he ran, "I don't have time to deal with those pests. I need to find Tylene quickly." On the other side, a sword had knocked down a guard of Count Bresch's army. It was Elkin who used extra force to break the guard's neck. That guard fell lifeless to the ground from a single blow. Surrounding Elkin were countless corpses. Elkin looked down with a cold expression, holding a weapon in each hand. Suddenly, someone spoke from behind, asking, "Why aren't you killing them?" The person wore the armor of a knight from Count Bresch's household and approached from behind Elkin, catching his attention. It was the captain of Count Bresch's cavalry, who now said in a sinister tone, "Too gentle, compared to a valvous knight." Elkin faced him and said, "You are the one who was there." In Elkin's mind, he recalled a knight captain. Then, as if realizing something, he immediately refuted his previous thought. No. He raised his sword, using his mouth to draw the blade from its sheath. His two swords finally emerged from their sheaths, his face panic-stricken, his mouth saying, "From you." He brought the two swords up in front of him, facing the knight captain who was pointing his sword at him. Elkin finally posed his question, "Who are you?" At that moment, the knight captain's face was contorted into an ugly grimace. Somewhere, glowing green lights appeared, so bright that it was blinding. White Dragon unleashed his power, the green lights cutting through the heads of the savage beasts. At that moment, White Dragon was expressionless, simply killing those beasts. Lying on the ground were the slain beasts, with the severely injured ones groaning in pain. One of them was trembling as if it wanted to get up, but before it could stand for long, it was struck by Jody's sword to the neck. On the other side, Gus and Skilla were coordinating their attacks, slaying the savage beasts. Gus shouted, "Got it! Even beheaded, it still wouldn't die." Jody chimed in, "Forget about them." The three of them, Gus, Jody, and Skilla, headed towards the stairs and ran up, leaving behind the inferno that was tightly wrapping around the beasts. On the ground lay a wolf's head severed from its body, but still moaning, its jaw trembling. At that moment, Raven approached the head of the beast that continued to whimper. He looked at the mark on the beast's head and thought, the monster has been decapitated, but is still moving. Recalling the scene of the numerous dead bodies in a burning mansion, he pondered the sudden attack by the Brescia family. Looking at the heads of the beasts beneath him, he thought, just as he had predicted, there was someone behind the conspiracy of all this. Surveying the surroundings engulfed in darkness and flames, the voice of an old man with a mustache rang out, "Compared to a mercenary, you're quite strong, aren't you?" His appearance surprised Raven. He held a staff adorned with purple gems, descended the stairs, and approached him while speaking. "You were attacked by those zombies, yet I see no injuries on you." Raven was astonished and frowned. That voice. The ominous voice of the mustachioed man said sorrowfully, "Raven." Reflecting on the past, he remembers being defeated by that man. The terrible voice of the mustached man continues, "You must die before you have a chance to be free." The image that appears is Baltai, holding Raven's hair, pulling his head up towards him. At that moment, he swings his sword, laughing heartily, saying, "Farewell, Raven." Its head separates from his body. Returning to the present, Baltai walks towards Raven, speaking as he approaches. "So I will have to deal with you myself." He smirks and says, "To serve our great plan." Behind him is a sea of flames, making him appear as if he has stepped out of hell. Raven is no different. He angrily shouts, "Bye, tie." The two men stand facing each other in the sea of fire, face to face. Seeing the wicked face of old Baltai, he suddenly remembers the words that the old man had said before. "Indeed, it is shameful, Raven, but you will not be free. You must perish here." Then the villain brutally kills him right on the battlefield, where he has fought like a fierce demon for many years to gain his freedom. Now, in this battle, the old man says, "Then I will handle you myself to serve the greater purpose." After finishing his words, he let out a harsh laugh, mocking him, causing Eren to grit his teeth and utter, "Baltai." Above the stairs, Fillmore and Elkin Isla were engaged in a fierce battle. Fillmore, laughing mockingly, charged forward to attack like a wild beast. However, his attack was quickly blocked by Elkin, who pinned his sword to the ground, making him angrily chuckle, "You little brat." As soon as he finished speaking, he lunged forward, relentlessly attacking Elkin. Taking advantage of his assault, Elkin aimed to stab him, but Fillmore noticed and blocked his strike while sneering, "You're still too inexperienced." He continued his frenzied assault as if hunting prey. "Got you." He viciously swung his weapon at Elkin, but Elkin successfully dodged, leaning back and leaving Fillmore astonished. Next, Elkin surged forward, using one sword to attack him while holding another sword in his other hand, bending low. Then he retreated and slashed. A strike landed on Fillmore, making him spit blood. Elkin continued to leap up, delivering a fatal slash across his neck, causing blood to splatter everywhere. It seemed that he had finished him off, but suddenly he tightened his grip on the sword and thrust it fiercely into Elkin's arm, causing him to wince in pain and crumble to his knees, clutching his bleeding arm. Fillmore tilted his head oddly, using his energy to heal the head that was nearly severed from his neck in Elkin's astonishment. He cackled, "Just as I thought, even though you are an experienced Valvas Knight, you are still unfamiliar with dealing with opponents like this, aren't you?" "You are no longer human, you bastard," Elkin said angrily. "I have transcended the limits of humanity to serve a great cause, to serve the powerful one. I possess this immortal body to eliminate the enemies for him." Elkin was surprised. "Great cause?" He replied sternly, "Ordinary people do not need to know. No, not me, and not you either." Elkin scoffed. "I see. You are definitely not human, just a puppet." Then he and Fillmore charged at each other again to decide the outcome. Below, Eren was also engaged in a fierce battle with Baltai, both throwing out lethal attacks. "Oh, how do you know my name?" Baltai spoke up. "Have we met before? Or have I become that famous?" Eren fiercely replied while launching his attack. "I have no obligation to answer you. You will die here." As soon as he finished speaking, he charged at Baltai to strike him, but Baltai managed to dodge and grinned at him like a clown. He remarked, "You're quite nimble, young man." Then he swung his axe at Eren, but Eren managed to parry it, surprising him. He thought, "He blocked my axe with just one hand." Eren ruthlessly pushed him away. At that moment, a terrifying aura radiated from him, instilling fear in Baltai. He thought, "Dragon aura," and then smiled. "How interesting, you are indeed a worthy prey. It awakens the Rakshasa in me, my demon-hunting blood boiling." Eren smiled back at him, enveloped in a seething aura, ready to engage in battle. A tremendous energy surrounded Eren, standing amidst the raging inferno. He fixed his gaze on Baltai, who stood opposite him. Eren's momentum overshadowed everything as the flames of the mansion complemented the fire of the white dragon. The dragon's aura transformed, taking on a radiant red like the sunset. Eren sported a wicked grin stretching from ear to ear. At that moment, his appearance was no different from Baltain's, both exuding extreme, inherent cruelty. Baltain stared at Eren and licked his lips with delight. After a moment, Eren decisively charged forward to attack first. Just a single stomp to gather momentum shattered the stone beneath his feet. Eren rushed in with a burning desire for revenge in his eyes. His face hardened, and the aura of the dragon emanated as a bright flame, following his every move. Eren charged towards Baltain with incredible energy, but he remained leisurely, seemingly with no intention to evade or prepare to block the attack. Baltain casually raised his hand to his mouth and whistled. Immediately, Eren was pounced on by 4 wolves with marks on their foreheads. They surrounded him from all sides and lunged unexpectedly, causing him to briefly hesitate. Eren clicked his tongue in frustration, glaring at the 4 wolves. He growled in a fierce voice, "Get away." At the same time, several beams of red light sliced through the air. Not a single wolf escaped. The bodies of the 4 wolves dropped around Eren, their heads and limbs severed, falling in disarray. Their parts were igniting like torches. Amid the falling, fragmented body parts obscuring his view, Eren's gaze quickly pierced through them. He spotted Baltai, riding on the back of a wolf, sneaking away while distracting him with some mediocre monsters. Seeing his cowardly demeanor only fueled Eren's anger further. Instead of immediately chasing after him, he glared menacingly in his direction and raised his sword. Eren swept his sword through the air, sending a fiery crescent-shaped blade of sword energy toward Baltai. He repeated this action continuously several times. The waves of sword energy pursued the wolf's footsteps, causing it to become disoriented, jumping from side to side instead of running straight ahead. However, Baltai, sitting on the wolf, showed no sign of worry as his escape plan was uncovered so swiftly. On the contrary, he bared his teeth and laughed with delight. Eren ignored the blood flowing from his nose. He grinned mockingly, muttering, "I won't let you escape." Eren disregarded his body's suffering under pressure. He was completely blinded by rage, the fragmented sounds filled with fury escaping his lips. "I will kill you, right here, Baltai." Eren aimed his sword at Baltai. Now, he had given up on fleeing and had turned back to confront Eren head-on. Surrounding him was a pack of wolves that had just been summoned. In response to Eren's declaration, Baltai sneered with a sinister demeanor. He looked at Eren with disdain, as if belittling his abilities, a gaze full of challenge. The angrier Eren became, the more smug Baltai felt. "All right then, keep going, get even angrier." Meanwhile, Jogi's group was frantically running away, escaping from the increasingly large flames. Scylla glanced back at Eren fighting Baltai. It seemed he had already dispatched the monsters. Hearing this, Gus followed Stilla's gaze. Dispatch. It looks more like he scattered them. They are no longer chasing us. Jody responded with enthusiasm. Well, that's even better for us. Now that we have a chance, we must quickly find Tylene. As soon as he finished speaking, Jody suddenly shouted. He realized it was Ruv Tylan crawling on the ground. Facing him were 3 Brescia soldiers advancing with their swords drawn. One of the 3 Brescia soldiers shouted angrily, Ruv Tylan, you traitor! By the order of the great Count Brescia, I will now eliminate you. Ruv Tylan, cornered and panicked, cried out. It's all slander. That foolish lord has gone insane. Do you really believe the words of that ugly pig? The knight of Brescia raised his sword high, glaring at Ruv Tylan. This has been reported by Sir Fillmore, the captain of the mightiest knight squad of Sistek. With indignation, after hearing the desperate cries of the man, the knight became even more enraged. There's no way he could be mistaken. The sword decisively swung down. Fortunately, Jody rushed in just in time, blocking the knight's blade that was descending upon Ruv Tylan. Ruv Tylan's face turned pale with fear, sitting on the ground, unable to even muster the strength to get up and run away. While blocking the knight's sword, Jody turned to Ruv Tylan with a mocking expression. Hello, Mr. Tylan. You seem, healthy, don't you? As if he hadn't heard Jody's mocking words, Ruv Tylan now values his life like gold, hastily exclaiming as if greeting his mother returning from the market, mercenaries. At the same time, Scylla and Gus also appeared surrounding the 2 remaining Brescia soldiers. They zipped past them so quickly that they didn't even have time to see their figures. Gus circled in front of one soldier, swinging his sword decisively and slicing through his abdomen. A painful scream erupted from his mouth. Then, another terrified scream rang out as the knife in Scylla's hand swiftly cut across the chest of another soldier. Jody had also finished off the soldier at his location with a precise strike, slicing through his throat. In the blink of an eye, the bodies of 3 Brescia soldiers lay sprawled on the floor after receiving fatal blows. As for Ruv Tylan, he remained motionless, sitting on the ground and refusing to get up. Gus looked at his feeble figure with a disdainful gaze. Well, even though he doesn't look great, you managed to save someone. Lucky you. Scylla joined in, taunting him. Not very strong, huh? Yet still daring to walk around boasting about being a knight. Ruv Tylan grimaced and looked at them. You! Thinking he would be angry and criticize them for daring to mock him, he instead shouted in a reproachful tone. Why are you all so late, you stupid fools? If you're so strong, you should have arrived earlier. No. Where are the other 3? Seeing Ruv Tylan ungrateful and daring to scold him, Gus couldn't contain his frustration, grabbed his collar, and lifted him up. He angrily shouted at him, Shut up, you damn noble. It's not like we came here voluntarily. If you keep complaining, I'll break your neck. Seeing the 2 of them arguing, Scylla joined in, pointing a knife at him and yelling, I will chase your relatives to the ends of the earth and torture them for money. Jody seemed to be the only adult present, cautiously looking into the fire and warning them, Hey, there's no time to joke around. A group of over a dozen Brescia soldiers, each wielding a sword, was charging towards them. Seeing the overwhelming numbers, all 3 were stunned and shouted loudly. Scylla exclaimed, slightly in awe of the number, Wow, there are so many. Upon hearing this, Jody quickly urged, Run. Frustrated with the idea of fleeing again, Gus snapped with a complaining tone, Not again. Meanwhile, Eren, despite his furious aura, was still facing a pack of aggressive wolves alone. Though taking them down felt like swatting at tiny flies, to him, their advantage was in their numbers and their fearlessness. They continuously charged at Eren like moths drawn to a flame. Eren swung his sword, killing them all. Each time, the longsword in his hand arced through the air, blood and flesh splattered, limbs and heads of the monsters flying into the sky, accompanied by a torrent of blood. Suddenly, one wolf bit into Eren's hand. At the same moment, an unknown arrow suddenly shot in and struck his shoulder. Eren looked up. Baltai was standing there with a crossbow, looking smug. He resembled a nobleman participating in a hunt as entertainment, with Eren as the prey surrounded by a pack of aggressive hounds. Baltai sat proudly atop his wolf, continually commanding the wolves to attack, then laughed to provoke Eren. Hey, you're just fighting the monsters. I'm feeling so lonely here. Didn't you say you would kill me? Eren was infuriated by his taunts. His anger was spiraling out of control. He was completely oblivious to the blood streaming from his nose. He angrily grabbed the jaws of the wolf that was gripping his right hand. Immediately, he pried the wolf's jaw off his arm. Quickly turning around, he smashed its skull while knocking it to the ground. Just as Eren finished dealing with that wolf, 2 more wolves leaped into the air and charged at him. Eren swung his sword, creating blazing arcs in the air. The sword energy instantly sliced through the bodies of the 2 wolves. The rancid blood of the wolves sprayed into the air and splattered onto his black armor. But at that moment, a stream of bright red blood also flowed from the corner of Eren's mouth. His eyes were glazed and his mind was gradually losing clarity due to rage. Baltai stood calmly observing everything as if enjoying a horror movie. That power is truly astonishing, he thought. Even after being injured and impaled, he still doesn't stop. With his rage intensifying, the desire to kill within Eren and the aura of the dragon emanating from him grew ever stronger. Baltai, seeing him like a beast going mad, couldn't help but exclaim, "Indeed, he is a creature with a dragon's aura. It's hard to tell who the real monster is." Baltai bared his teeth with a sinister thought. That's right, this is not a battle, this is a hunt. As he loaded an arrow onto his crossbow, he chuckled with delight, going mad, killing, raging, until he exhausted himself. At this moment, Eren truly looked like a bloodthirsty madman. The more blood from the wolves spilled, the more exhilarated he became. His bloodshot eyes and furious face were a stark contrast to the gruesome slaughter that caused blood to flow even more from his mouth as Pendragon's body was under tremendous strain. Baltai joyfully savored the scene with a wide grin. Huku! He wore a sinister smile and raised his crossbow towards Eren. Hunting dragons is really fun. The fire in the mansion was spreading more fiercely, having consumed almost half of the Tylan estate, but the fighters inside seemed oblivious to it. The duel between Isla and Fillmore was also becoming extremely intense. Isla, with his right arm injured, had lost the advantage in using the sword. Fillmore continued to attack relentlessly, showing no signs of fatigue with strikes that showed no weakness. Isla began to weaken after fending off Fillmore's continuous sword strikes. His agility also visibly decreased due to the pain in his right arm, which distracted him. As a result, Fillmore was able to create a few additional scratches on his face and forehead. Fillmore surged forward again, swinging his sword high above his head with a resounding shout, "Ha!" But just as his sword swung down, Isla managed to block it in time. Although his strength had diminished considerably, Isla still had enough power to fend off such basic, direct attacks. After a deafening clash came the chilling sound of metal scraping against metal. Fillmore pressed down with force, forcing Isla to lower his center of gravity to brace himself. Behind Isla was only the broken railing. If he lost his balance even slightly, he would fall into the flames below. Having pushed Isla into a corner, Fillmore smirked with pleasure. "You've done quite well, holding on with one hand until now, but unfortunately, your life ends here." Just then, a group of Breshida soldiers rushed up from the lower floor. Their shouts made Isla look back. "Captain, Sir Fillmore!" The reinforcements hurriedly approached, each wielding a sword, as they scrambled toward the stairs leading to the second floor. "We will support you." Seeing this, Fillmore chuckled mockingly, glancing at the soldiers before turning back to Isla. "If those soldiers join in, you will have a chance to win." His eyes widened with challenge. "Now you must choose. Either run and be hunted down as a snack or stay here and have your head neatly chopped off." His voice was full of provocation. "Choose." Fillmore put more force into the sword handle, pressing down hard, causing sparks to fly as the two swords clashed. Isla gritted his teeth, slowly standing up. Though he didn't want to choose, he knew that if he didn't let go and run now, his life would be in jeopardy. Fillmore pressed harder once again, causing Isla's mind to become overwhelmed. The pride of a swordsman did not allow him to retreat before the enemy, but the situation. Suddenly, Isla caught sight of something and a flash of insight sparked in his mind. His left arm was nearing its limit of endurance. It was trembling from the impulses of the two swords. Finally, unable to withstand it any longer, Isla quietly bent down, hiding his emotions, and chose to let go, truly releasing the sword. But that didn't mean he intended to run away. Isla suddenly crouched down, wrapping his left arm around Fillmore's back, not giving him a chance to counterattack. Everything happened in less than a second. Before Fillmore even had time to realize what Isla was doing, Isla had seized his belt and shoved him forward. Although Isla's left arm had weakened, he still had enough strength to execute a classic wrestling move. He took advantage of Fillmore's distraction and the force of the push, causing him to lurch forward. In front of him now was the railing of the corridor that had lost its crossbar, leaving only sharp wooden stakes. Isla skillfully threw a strike, causing Fillmore to be sent flying into the air before crashing down, landing on his back on a wooden stake. Isla had turned danger into opportunity, making the most of the advantage that Fillmore had inadvertently created. A terrified scream erupted from Fillmore's mouth. The soldiers below heard the scream and, in panic, looked up, shouting in horror, "Captain, Captain!" The soldiers, who had not yet reached the second floor, were alarmed to see Fillmore impaled by the stake. They shouted loudly, "Go help Captain Fillmore! Kill that bastard!" At this moment, Isla had no intention of fleeing. He stood calmly facing Fillmore, who was hanging upside down, and said, "You seem to be quite respected, huh?" Fillmore chuckled smugly, replying with arrogance, "That's right. You can't take on these soldiers." He glanced eagerly towards the staircase. "And I, Nothing like this can kill me. Azula shot a cold glare at Fillmore's smug smile, feeling a surge of discomfort in his heart. He didn't want to argue or expose that disgust. He simply silently picked up his sword and prepared to finish him off. Azula raised the sword in front of Fillmore, slowly speaking, but this battle is over. Azula swung the sword high, her gaze cold and sharp. Fillmore, no matter how many reinforcements he had, could not react as quickly as Azula's strike. The harsh truth was that he was now no different from a fish lying belly up on a cutting board, waiting to die. Azula swung down mercilessly. A stream of bright red blood sprayed into the air, releasing a pungent smell. Thus, the duel had ended at the mansion engulfed in raging flames. Meanwhile, Eren found himself at a disadvantage. 2 arrows were lodged firmly in his hands, his body was covered in wounds, and blood was pouring out from his nose and mouth. He began to breathe heavily, his body slowly running out of strength. The dragon's aura still provided a defensive capability, helping to fend off the wolves that surrounded him, baring their fangs and claws, but the energy Eren emitted was clearly weakening. Eren clenched his teeth, suppressing the moans escaping his mouth. He forcefully pulled out each arrow lodged in his arms. Despite the pain, hatred, and anger overwhelmed most of that sensation, Eren charged forward, filled with fervor, swinging his sword to carve a brilliant arc in the air, beheading a wolf lunging at him. Another bright red streak cut across, and the head of another wolf fell to the ground, rolling like a ball. Eren stood amidst the chaotic battlefield, decisively slaughtering the monsters around him. At his feet, a pile of corpses accumulated. This bloody scene further exhilarated Baltai. He laughed maniacally, crazily shouting, "Continue the madness, be even more insane." Baltai wore a sinister smile, thinking to himself, madness will generate power, but that power will dull your sword, and eventually, it will exhaust you. He triumphantly observed Eren gradually weakening. The strikes emanating from Eren's fierce spirit were powerful, yet lacked precision. This undead army truly was his nemesis. Baltai smugly grinned. "I will let the undead weaken him. Then I will personally finish him off with a single swing of my axe." The more Baltai thought, the more he found his plan perfect. He bared his teeth in an unmistakable wicked smile and shouted, provoking Eren's fury. Aiming his crossbow at Eren, he sneered, "Go all out, kid. Whatever you do is futile." Baltai aimed the crossbow at Eren, grinning provocatively. From the very beginning, everything in this world has already been predetermined, everything, including this battle. As expected, Eren's anger flared even more fiercely after Baltain's taunts, but he was still not satisfied and continued to yell, "Your foolishness and stubbornness won't help you live any longer." Baltai laughed in self-satisfaction, declaring, "The fate of Ruv Tylan has been sealed, along with Sissek as well." As soon as the name Sissek was mentioned, Eren seemed to awaken. The confusion and rage within him unexpectedly began to subside. Baltai, feeling triumphant and unaware that Eren's anger was fading, continued to provoke. "Where can you run from your fate?" He became more and more enthusiastic as he spoke, arrogantly declaring to Eren, "We will rule the Empire, and in the end, you will become our slave. You will ha." Baltai, playing the role of a boisterous villain, inadvertently spoke words that awakened Eren's mind, which was drowning in rage. He recalled the scene of the serfs and stewards of the Veld family becoming miserable slaves under the brutal rule of the tyrants. On the way of the mansion, he also witnessed how the lives of the people here had become so worthless that they were slaughtered indiscriminately, with no one caring. They ran away in tears, the children who lost their parents sitting amidst the ruins, crying for their unfortunate fate. All of this was just because of the meaningless war of the lords, a war that brought no benefits to them. Eren awakened, realizing he had lost his direction. The fire of rage in his heart gradually subsided as rational thoughts flowed through his mind. Deep down, he blamed himself. "What am I doing?" In the blink of an eye, the bright red mist surrounding Eren, tainted with anger, vanished. He pondered for a moment, calming his emotions with a clear stream of thought. But just then, a pack of wolves, following Baltain's orders, rushed to attack him. Baltai, with a fierce voice, drew his crossbow and aimed at Eren, roaring, "Die!" As soon as he finished, the arrow shot out of the crossbow, cutting through the air towards Eren. A few streaks of blue light cut through the atmosphere. The pure blue flame of the white dragon finally returned to Eren. The mist from him was now sharp and precise, easily slicing through the incoming arrow like a bolt of lightning. Baltain's arrow was split in two, falling along with the limbs of the wolves that had charged from behind Eren, even though he didn't need to look back. Baltai was stunned, staring with wide eyes, his pupils shrinking to the size of a grain of rice. Before him, the draconic aura emanating from Eren was a gentle yet imposing shade of blue. Eren's sword strikes not only carried the aura, but also the traditional dragon fire. Its slashes accurately sliced through the legs of the wolf, preventing it from attacking any further. The wolf's forelegs were engulfed in blue flames that could not be extinguished. Baltai felt a moment of bewilderment, both astonished and angry. He could actually strike with such precision, even though my zombie army is very agile. Baltai realized that the situation had changed. His excitement vanished, replaced by a grimace of annoyance. He roared, "This bastard has made them unable to move anymore." In Eren's eyes, there was no longer any trace of resentment. He coldly looked straight into Baltain's eyes, his face filled with the pride and honor of a warrior. Eren's mind, which had been like a sea in a storm, suddenly became still, like a tranquil lake with not a ripple. Before Baltai was the aura of a dragon emanating from Eren, radiating a gentle yet imposing green. Baltai rode on a wolf with his crossbow aimed at Eren. He was somewhat surprised, pausing, his gaze questioning as he looked at Eren. He was no longer attacking recklessly. The more Baltai looked at Eren, the more vexed he became. A wave of irritation enveloped him as he sensed the shift in Eren's aura. He gritted his teeth and growled, "Damn it." The form of the dragon energy wrapping around Eren now exuded a serene and steady demeanor, no longer roaring fiercely, but radiating the majesty of a dragon. Eren was silent, its thoughts becoming calmer. That's right. Eren looked towards Baltai, who was in shock as he temporarily set aside his hatred and resentment. He reminded himself that now was not the time to be confined by his fury. Eren gripped the sword tightly. A blue light from the gem on the hilt began to spread. He told himself, "As the heir, I will carry on the wishes of the Veld family." The image of a man resembling him appeared in his mind, firmly swinging the sword, beheading a wolf to protect the two mother and child huddled below. Another scene emerged, that man eliminating the fierce pack of wolves, then reaching out towards the mother and child amidst cheers. Behind him was a young man with a similar appearance. Eren recalled that image, his hands tightening around the sword even more. When all distracting thoughts had completely disappeared, Eren opened his eyes, raised his sword forward, enveloped in dragon energy, and made a determination. "I will fulfill my duty." Meanwhile, outside the mansion, the reinforcements continued to pour in, undeterred by the fierce flames. Just a moment of negligence, and anyone could end up with no bones to collect. The fire had consumed the mansion, spreading all the way to the roof, burning fiercely and billowing thick smoke. The wind occasionally swept away a patch of flames along with the smoke. On a part of the roof that had not caught fire, Jody's group was trying to protect Love Thailand from a group of soldiers pointing their swords at them. Now Jody's group had been pushed to a corner. A knight leading the Brescia army laughed triumphantly, pointing his sword at Jody. "It's over. You can't escape." Jody's group stood in front of Love Thailand. They were tense, gritting their teeth while searching for a solution. What it seemed hopeless. They were truly trapped. Where they stood was on a high roof, surrounded by flames and soldiers, eager to seize the opportunity to take them down. Love Thailand was of no help, its face pale from fear, yet he still managed to voice his reproach. "Hey, why did we come here? Now we're at a dead end." Sala was already confused, and upon hearing his accusations, she became extremely angry and snapped. "What other choice do we have? We can't just run into the fire. The mansion is engulfed in flames." Gus, also annoyed, glared at Love Thailand. "If you keep complaining, I'll hand you over to them." Even Jody joined in with a sneer. "Just joking, but that might be the only way for us to escape alive." Opposite them was a large group of soldiers armed with swords, and Jody's group was still trying to resist. Only Love Thailand was terrified, constantly stammering, I can't believe this." Seeing that Jody's group had no way out, the soldiers charged forward, their shouts echoing throughout the mansion. Jody's group was ready for a fight to the end, even though they could easily leave Love Thailand behind to find a chance to escape. When the Brescia soldiers were just a few steps away from Jody's group, a crack suddenly appeared on the rooftop, accompanied by a bright blue flame and the sound of breaking bricks. The roof area beneath the Brescia soldiers cracked into pieces and a blue flame erupted, startling them. The Jody group was equally astonished, wide-eyed, as they watched a part of the roof seemingly upheaved by an invisible force. Jody exclaimed in amazement, "What is happening?" At that moment, Soldrake in human form surged up from the hole just created in the roof. In the blink of an eye, she appeared in midair with her wings spread wide, trailing clouds of dust and smoke along her flight path. The three members of Jody gaped in shock, staring at Soldrake hovering in the sky, forgetting all about escaping from the Brescia soldiers. Even the Brescia soldiers were stunned, standing frozen as they gazed up at the beautiful flying creature. In Soldrake's hand was a sword blazing with fire, replacing the sword she usually used to deceive others. Although Soldrake had revealed some characteristics of a dragon, her magnificent outspread wings, no one recognized her true identity. Her face was expressionless, indifferently looking down where the voice called out, "Soul!" Scylla stammered, confused. "Ha! Ha! What wings?" Love Tylene, still astonished by Soldrake's appearance, showed no skepticism, only admiration. Beautiful. Soldrake hovered above them, and everyone stopped all activities to watch her. Shortly after, Soldrake dived down like a hawk targeting its prey, her wings slightly retracted. The Jody group was startled by Soldrake's sudden action, and they grew wary, alert to every movement of hers. Soldrake swooped down close to the group then. With one hand, grabbed Scylla and Love Tylene. With her other hand, she grabbed the collars of Jody and Gus, lifting all four of them off the roof in complete bewilderment. Before they could comprehend what was happening, Soldrake soared into the sky at breakneck speed. Everyone was terrified, their spirits lost, panic-stricken screams erupted, but they dared not struggle too much, fearing that if Soldrake lost her grip, there would be no way to save themselves. Below, the Brescia soldiers stood dumbfounded, watching the figures of the group flying farther away, their image fading in the bright red sunset. Soldrake calmly flew away. Below, the soldiers were still dumbfounded, unable to collect their thoughts. After a while, they snapped back to reality and shouted, "Teeth, they are running away. What the heck is happening? That woman." Soldrake gracefully soared through the sky as if she were an eagle, while the four others were like tiny mice, helpless in her claws. Love Tylene murmured in confusion. She's lifting several adults with one hand. That's terrifying strength. Stilla, being dragged along with this foolish man, irritably replied, "Is that all that surprises you?" Jody and Gus, hearing the exchange between the two, felt similarly to Scylla, but they were too frustrated to say anything more to this clueless noble. Gus simply sighed, "Unbelievable." At that moment, the mansion had become a pile of ruins. Flames danced on the rooftops, spilling out of the windows as if celebrating the downfall of the Tylene family. Inside the mansion, black smoke gathered in clusters like clouds before a storm, and fire blazed fiercely everywhere. The Brescia soldiers showed clear signs of fear as they finally reached the hallway, but they stood frozen, unwilling to take another step forward. Asla stood there, his cold gaze glancing at them with hidden meaning. He calmly observed, his eyes devoid of malice, yet still sending shivers down the soldiers' spines. In Esla's hand was a sword, its blade still dripping with fresh red blood. Thor's head was tilted back, a wide grin on his face. He commanded, "Oh, you all did very well. Come here, you." The Brescia knights looked at their esteemed commander with expressions of utter disgust. However, Fillmore was completely oblivious to this. He continued to shout encouragement. "Truly the valiant army of Sisek that I have personally nurtured." Isla stood there, entirely unafraid or concerned that he might be attacked by the reinforcements. He looked down with a contemptuous gaze. Such loyal associates. Fillmore, with his neck half severed and his head hanging, still gaped with a cheerful smile and continued to give orders. "Take this man down." The scene at this moment was truly horrifying. Fillmore was impaled on a wooden stake, his limbs mangled, his two arms severed, and his head about to detach from his neck. The savage urging continued to come from his throat, where thick black fumes were surging. "Take this guy down immediately." But the Brescia soldiers remained frozen in place, afraid to approach. A few soldiers stammered, "See, Commander." "Commander Fillmore." Fillmore seemed to still not understand the issue, staring at them with a bewildered expression. A trembling Brescia soldier stared at his dismembered body and stuttered. "And no, he isn't the commander." The soldier pointed at Fillmore, his voice resolute. "What is that monster? He is an impostor." Fillmore's eyes widened, his pupils suddenly shrinking to the size of a pinhead upon hearing the soldier's words. Flames had already started to consume his body, yet he didn't utter a single sound. Now, he was simply taken aback by the accusation from that soldier. The Brescia knights, with their eyes full of rage, began raising their swords high and charged at Fillmore without a second thought. Asla didn't care at all. He quietly sheathed his sword and turned to leave immediately afterward. The soldiers quickly began discussing among themselves. One of them voiced his suspicion. This fight only happened because the commander said something to Count Brescia, right? So what about Tylene's betrayal? Esla turned his head to look at the soldiers debating, wanting to see if they were as intelligent as an ordinary person. The result was exactly what Asla expected. They told each other, "It's all fake, isn't it? We might have been fooled." Soon after, the eyes of the Brescia knights shifted back to Fillmore, who was sprawled across the railing, with flames merely licking in his body. However, he couldn't let out a single groan, instead wearing a stunned expression as he listened to their discussion. Fillmore was just starting to feel fear. His face was panicked, sweat streaming down his forehead. The Brescia knights grew more frustrated as they continued to talk. They began to get irritable, telling each other, "I suspected something was off from the very beginning." Me too. They were both frustrated by the feeling of being deceived and angry that many of their comrades had died for this meaningless war. All the knights turned to Fillmore, shouting in outrage, "How dare you deceive us? Where is the real commander?" The rage erupted, and the knights raised their swords and charged at Fillmore, intent on killing him. Seeing the knights rushing toward him with deadly intent, Fillmore screamed with a terrified face, hastily explaining, "I am indeed human. I have surpassed the limits of humanity." He still tried to scream fragmented words before the sharp blades came down, "For the sake of our great plan." Moments later, blood splattered everywhere. Each strike of the knights' swords was merciless. Isla coldly glanced at Fillmore, his face betraying no satisfaction at all. This was all the inevitable result that he knew he deserved to face. His face quietly watched the blood splattering. Then he looked at the bloodied sword in his hand and muttered, "A puppet that has surpassed the limits of humanity." Isla stared at the blade that was marked with countless scratches from various battles, a strange feeling enveloping him. Isla saw his past self reflected in the shiny blade and the deep red blood flowing down. After a moment of reflection, Isla closed his eyes and gently sheathed the sword. As the blade disappeared behind its leather cover, Isla muttered mockingly, "How foolish." Leaving behind the Brescia soldiers fiercely charging at Fillmore with lethal intent, Isla walked away. The Tylene mansion now resembled the Val family's villa of yore, engulfed in flames and about to become an irretrievable wreck. Above, Sol was still holding the clothes of 4 floating individuals, hovering right above the mansion. They silently looked down, waiting for the arrival of the most important person, but only saw the surrounding soldiers. At this moment, Jody noticed something. He nudged Gus gently and pointed down, whispering, "Hey, look, there's something very strange." Jody hesitantly asked Gus, her voice filled with doubt, "The Brescia army has stopped attacking, right?" Sol looked around, her gaze immediately returning to the burning mansion. A wave of anxiety washed over her as she silently called out Ray's name. Surely she knew he was in that sea of flames. Meanwhile, the remaining Brescia soldiers in the mansion were passing along the latest news. "Commander Fillmore is a fake? So what the hell are we fighting for?" Nearby, Eren and Baltai could also hear the entire conversation among the knights. As Baltai listened to the rumors spreading among the Brescia soldiers, his face lost its arrogance and clicked his tongue, muttering curses at Fillmore. "Ugh, what a useless puppet." Eren sarcastically challenged, "It seems you won't be getting any more support, huh? So let's wrap this up quickly, Baltai." Baltai glared at Eren with a scowl. He noticed that the wounds on Eren had healed as if he had never been injured. Baltai carefully examined Eren from head to toe, unable to help but wonder, has he really healed already? Baltai looked at the kid he considered nameless in front of him and began to make all sorts of speculations in his mind. Could it be that he also had an immortal body like those zombies? It couldn't be. This power. In an instant, the image of the Troll King flashed briefly in Baltain's mind, as if. Baltai gritted his teeth at the thought of the similarities between Eren and the Troll King. A chilling feeling surged from deep within him. Baltai was still puzzled about how Eren knew his name. He asked Eren once more, but with a much more serious tone than before. "How do you know my name? Who told you this? And what else did he say?" Eren pondered for a moment, then closed his eyes and calmly opened his mouth to speak with a confident and proud tone. "I am." In his heart, Eren thought of the name Erenvald, the name he had longed to say in this situation. But Erenvald's past was now something only he and Soldrake needed to know. A mysterious smile appeared on Eren's lips as the blue flames of the dragon erupted fiercely from his body. The dragon's aura emanating from Eren suddenly grew immensely stronger. Wings spread wide behind him and overwhelming pressure was released, causing the undead wolf that Baltai was riding, which had never known fear, to raise its hackles. The horrifying oppression created by the dragon's aura made the owner of the wolf feel overwhelmed and cold to the bone. For a moment, Baltai felt panic before his opponent. Baltai stared wide-eyed at the brilliant blue light encasing Eren's entire body. He gritted his teeth in fear, wondering, what the hell is this? Under the blinding light of the blue flame, Eren's black armor gradually dissolved like mist, giving way to a bright white color, and even the sword was regaining its original pure hue. Baltai was stunned and full of doubts. Eren's armor was changing color, turning white. He watched Eren in his true form as the transformation magic gradually faded away. Quickly, the color change spread up to Eren's breastplate. Not only was the black stripped away, but the monster's blood and his own were also thoroughly cleansed. One by one, everything changed. Next was his cloak, and finally Eren's hair returned to its original color. When Eren completed his transformation, he stood tall and proud like a dragon knight statue, sculpted from history, the beauty of righteousness, honor, calmness, and determination all embodied in one person. Eren coldly opened his mouth, emitting a chilling sound. Contractor of the White Dragon, Eren Pendragon. Faced with this suffocating pressure, Baltai momentarily froze, unsure of what to do. After a moment of bewilderment, Baltai panicked and shouted, his tone filled with doubt and terror. "Eren Pendragon, are you saying?" Realizing the situation, Baltain's expression swiftly changed, becoming cautious. He faced Eren for a long time as if he wanted to pierce through him with his gaze. Baltain gritted his teeth and frowned slightly. He looked at Eren, who stood silently, eyes cold blue locked onto him as if looking down on him. This only compelled Baltain to eliminate Eren right here. He did not hesitate for even a second, immediately charging forward with his axe raised high, confronting Eren directly. Eren was also ready to face him, swinging his sword back. Baltain rushed in, lifting the axe over his head with both hands, taking advantage of his height while sitting on the wolf's back, which was taller than Eren. He intended to chop down on Eren as if he were splitting a lob. Eren had no intention of jumping up like Baltain. On the contrary, he deliberately lowered his center of gravity to the height of the wolf's head and swung his sword horizontally. The heirloom sword at that moment was enveloped by a powerful dragon aura, seemingly capable of severing a person with just one strike effortlessly. Eren's eyes shone brightly in that decisive moment. At the same time, Baltain brought the axe down with a thunderous roar and a fierce expression. A streak of blue light cut through the air, accompanied by blazing dragon fire and crackling lightning. With just one move, Eren sliced Baltain in half. His upper body flew into the air, soaring over Eren's head, while his lower body and the wolf collapsed at Eren's feet. The end for one of the major villains in Eren's life seemed to come too quickly and easily. Eren was able to avenge his hatred, but his expression remained cold. His eyes did not waver, even though he had personally brought an end to his enemy. Baltain was sliced in half in an instant. Everything happened so quickly that he had no time to feel anything. His facial muscles froze, maintaining the state of screaming while attacking Eren. After tumbling through the air, Baltain's upper body hit the ground with a thud, like a sandbag being thrown down. At that moment, Eren was slowly retracting the dragon's aura that surrounded his sword. The energy retracted slowly, and the blue light faded accordingly. Eren had no intention of turning back to look at the body of his enemy, or at least he didn't feel the need to hurry to do so. He was confident that no one could survive that blow, which is why he acted calmly and slowly. Unexpectedly for Eren, Baltain suddenly opened his mouth, speaking with a sly smile. "You are quite a special one, Eren Pendragon." Eren was startled at the sound of Baltain's voice, turning his head in disbelief. An enemy who should have died under his sword was now speaking normally, leaving Eren astonished. Eren immediately turned to look at Baltain. Clearly, he was nothing more than a lump of flesh, a body missing both arms, with his bloated form rolling on the ground, yet his mouth continued to speak in a provocative tone. However, it's a pity that this is just a puppet. Baltain laughed boisterously, smugly looking at Eren with a mocking gaze. He lay in a pool of thick blood, and a plume of black smoke was escaping from his abdomen. The head of the wolf that Baltain had been riding still growled, and from its severed neck, dark energy was also seeping out. Seeing this, Eren gritted his teeth, both shocked and furious to the point of being speechless. In contrast to Eren's expression, Baltain's face showed curiosity. His body began to melt away like dripping wax. Seemingly unconcerned about that, he asked Eren once more, "Where did you get that immortal body? How do you know my name?" Baltain looked at Eren's impassive face and guessed that he had no intention of answering him. So, without waiting for a response, he clicked his tongue scornfully. A kid from the Pendragon clan, someone who was ridiculed for being a tiny, cowardly white worm. Hearing those strange, nonsensical words, Eren's nose crinkled in annoyance, but he couldn't do anything more, as the person in front of him was just a puppet. Baltain's monologue continued, and Eren did not walk away. On the contrary, he patiently listened to gather more information from him. Anyway, it seems that you are a significant obstacle to many of our plans." Upon hearing that, Eren briefly frowned. With a face increasingly distorted like a plastic doll scorched in fire, Baltain proclaimed loudly, "I will pursue and hunt you down until you die, by any means necessary." He rolled his eyes back and declared forcefully, "I swear on the name of the mad dog of the squad leader, Tovan Baltain." Suddenly after that, his eyes became hollow and then filled with the light of dark magic. Thick, dark, resin-like substances oozed from his body. His gleeful laughter echoed throughout the room. Not long after, his body completely transformed into a gooey, pitch-black puddle, reeking in front of Eren. Eren pondered the words of Baltain from earlier. After a moment, he gently spoke. "That's right. Nothing has changed yet." Eren looked around the mansion engulfed in flames reminiscent of the Veld family estate from years ago and said, "This is just the beginning." Eren regained his usual determination and cold demeanor. First, starting with Love Tylene. Meanwhile, in the verdant sea, the last rays of sunlight hurriedly raced toward the horizon at the call of the sun. Both the skies and the sea turned a deep red. The winds grew stronger, carrying black smoke that cut across the sky. The direction of the black smoke wavered toward a city standing out amid the vast ocean. A candle flickered to life in a room. A few beautiful young women were in a state of undress. Their skin varied from fair to tan. One with long purple hair sat beside a young woman with black hair cascading over her shoulders. They tentatively covered their sensitive areas with a thin blanket. Fear was reflected in their trembling eyes. They all stared at the man sitting in the middle of the bed. That man was Baltai. The women looked at him with fearful eyes, for suddenly, as they were in the midst of ecstasy, wounds appeared on his body, bleeding. Even Baltai was taken aback by what was happening. His eyes widened, his face turned pale. He suddenly realized something was wrong. Although the wounds that appeared on him were not deep and only blew a little, what shocked him was the sudden feeling of pain that transmitted to his brain. A shy young girl opened her mouth, reaching out her hand to touch him. "Be Baltai, there's blood." He sat still as a statue, his head bowed. Baltai was now biting his lip in frustration and horror. "The injuries I've sustained have passed through that puppet and reached my real body." Baltain's lips moved slightly, producing a sound that only he could hear. "I must urgently report this to that person." In another place, thousands of stars had filled the night sky and darkness was enveloping the vast territory. But the light from the large mansion was immersed in a dance of fire and wind. The flames surged with every gust of wind, as if dancing under the desolate night. At that moment, Saul was looking in one direction along with everyone else. Everyone's gaze was focused on the name Lovtai. He gritted his teeth, holding tightly onto his trembling lips. Eren stood right in front of Lovtai, his face arrogant and cold, his sharp, judgmental eyes scrutinizing every expression on his face. Lovtai was tied up, crouched low at Eren's feet in a demeaning posture. In the distance, illuminating their scene, was a mansion engulfed in flames. The sight was reminiscent of that year, but the people had changed. Eren couldn't help but feel moved by the similarity. He opened his mouth to speak in a grim tone. Back then, our positions were reversed. Lovtai felt a chill at Eren's grim voice. He looked up at him with a furrowed brow full of concern, stammering in reply. "Ha! Though, what the hell are you talking about?" Eren remained silent, narrowing his eyes at him, his blue eyes cold and deep like the unfathomable depths of the sea. For a moment, memories of the past flooded his mind. Eren recalled his own situation 10 years ago, chained like a dog and powerless to watch everything engulfed in flames. It was at that time that Lovtai came before Eren, grabbed his hair and lifted him up to look into his youthful face. He gazed deeply into Eren's resolute eyes and then broke into a mocking smile full of contempt. Eren also remembered the moment he fell to the ground in pain, heavy raindrops dripping on his face. He was so small that he could only see the heads of his family members being displayed for the nobles to mock and ridicule. And the one who had brought him to the brink of extermination was now kneeling humbly before him. The past flashed before him, and the perpetrators stood right in front of him. Eren could not help but feel anger. He clenched his teeth in fury. The blade glinted in the air, carrying all of Eren's rage. He swung the sword down without a moment's hesitation, but the blade did not take Lovtai life. It stopped the moment it touched his neck. His face was pale, devoid of a single drop of blood. Eren had not taken Lovtai life because he was still useful. He glared and broke the silence. 3 years ago, you sent a letter to the Velt family, didn't you? Lovtai was stunned by Eren's question, his face showing some panic. He pressed his lips tightly, sweating profusely with anxiety. He did not expect someone to ask this question, let alone from an unknown person. Eren ignored the terrified Lovtai and continued to seek an appropriate answer. To set the stage for the assassination of Prince Saiyan, you sent a letter laced with poison. Upon hearing these words, Lovtai eyes widened in horror and he stammered, uttering fragmented sounds. How? Eren did not hesitate, releasing a powerful aura that exerted a tremendous pressure to overwhelm his psyche. As the aura emanated, all those present who were unaware of Eren's true identity were filled with fear. Although this oppression was not aimed at them, an eerie feeling pervaded the atmosphere. Jody trembled from this terrible pressure. Is this an aura? It was something that only powerful warriors who had traversed countless battlefields could wield. Jody's thoughts, witnessing Eren's strong aura pressuring the enemy, made him feel panic. But this was the first time he had seen such a gigantic aura. Eren looked at Lovtai with a judging gaze, his voice cold. He began with the simplest question. Because you branded the Velt family as traitors? Lovtai's eyes shook, his face turned pale, and his body trembled uncontrollably. He was at a loss for words, drowning in fear. Eren was not patient enough to listen to his excuses. Immediately, he glared at him, urging him in a harsh voice, "Answer me." Lovtai felt a shiver run down his spine and quickly opened his mouth before Eren's cold voice. Yes. Inside, he couldn't help but feel confused. Ugly, what is this? Under Eren's pressure, words automatically spilled from his mouth. The Velt clan has opposed the policy I implemented. They are just a bunch of lowly. His heart mixed thoughts of fear overwhelmed him, and he could not resist. Feeling the sharp, cold pressures like blades pointing at him, Love Tylene panicked and hurriedly confessed. But I had no idea that the poison would be sent to the Crown Prince. Love Tylene's face crumpled like a rag, and he thought in horror. His aura has exceeded the ordinary. His face turned pale as banana leaves, his whole body trembled uncontrollably, and his eyes darted in fear, thinking, it's just like the aura of that guy. Eren continued to question with a sharp voice, his face radiating brutality. Who ordered you to do this? Love Tylene hung his head and looked down at the ground, unable to face Eren any longer. He struggled to open his mouth, stuttering each word before Eren's authoritative tone. Oh, or he tried to speak, his breath coming in short gasps and his voice trembling. It was him, Orc. Eren frowned, grimacing at Love Tylene's vague answer, but he remained silent, waiting for Love Tylene to provide a clearer explanation. Love Tylene knew what Eren's silence meant, and he continued to speak in a shaky voice. He is a hybrid between an Orc and a human, a fearsome pirate lord. He sent you a message to eliminate the Count's guest. Eren frowned again, glaring when he heard Love Tylene's detailed explanation. A pirate, huh? Immediately, Isla standing next to Saul seemed to realize what Eren was thinking. Love Tylene trembled, bowing his head to the ground, justifying himself. Of course, I was wary of him, but I couldn't resist besides. Love Tylene recounted the circumstances of his only meeting with Tolio. Love Tylene was restrained by two orcs standing behind him. Tolio's expression at that moment was filled with arrogance, and his confident tone assured him that, even if you were to be exposed, we can't do anything bad to you. Tolio sat cross-legged wearing a confident smile as he declared to Love Tylene, You see, I'm not just an ordinary pirate. Unable to bear the suffocating feeling any longer, in just a moment, his hair had turned white, his face became haggard, with beads of sweat dotting it. Finally, he struggled to utter a few words. Oranges. He could no longer withstand it. The poison had taken both his surname and his given name. Tolio Oranges. That's his name. The answer immediately left Eren stunned. Eren couldn't hide his astonished expression, repeating the name in his mind. Oranges. Is it Duke Oranges? That thought made him freeze. Raven recalled the supreme ruler of the Southern Territory, the domain of Duke Oranges, the Sea Dragon King. The image of the water dragon resurfaced in his memory. He recalls another scene, his thoughts continuing, the face of that pirate emerging in a frenzied manner. Raven remembers when Even fought that pirate, he swung his sword towards him. Back in reality, Tylene knelt at his feet, everyone waiting for Raven's decision. Jody turned to Elkin and asked, What the hell is he talking about, Elkin? Elkin didn't answer, simply staring ahead. Elkin looked at Raven and called his name, Pendragon. He sheathed his sword. Raven looked straight ahead and spoke seriously. It seems we have found those behind this incident. The Count rushed over, his eyes filled with tears, shouting, What the hell have you done to my Sophia? The Count stepped forward, holding the girl in his arms. Everyone's gaze turned to him. Raven glanced over and read his name, Count Brescia. He was in armor, his furious face trembling. The Count gritted his teeth, crying out, My Sissic beauty, no, the beauty of the Empire, my beloved daughter, Sophia. The girl he held lay in the Count's arms, her eyes gouged out as if someone had dubbed them out, her hair and ears distorted. He exclaimed, How can my beloved daughter end up like this? The Count held the girl in his arms, looking at Tylene, blaming him. It's your fault, isn't it, Tylene? He trembled in uncertainty. The Count shouted, Gouge out his eyes, make him crawl on the ground like a dog for me. Kill him. The people standing around were silent. Tylene knelt on the ground, scared. Scylla, with a look of contempt, smirked. Elkin, with a face showing disgust, asked, What is that fat pig saying? Raven's gaze was serious as he glanced at the Count, replying, Captain Fillmore has been manipulated by someone like a puppet. He continued, Perhaps your daughter Sophia has undergone something similar. The Count's expression went completely blank. Raven explained further, Surely those two have been acting unusually. The soldiers behind were murmuring among themselves. The Count could hardly believe it. He stood frozen in place. Raven shot him an angry glance and said bluntly, You started this meaningless war just because you were deceived by someone else, you useless fool. At this moment, the Count was completely frightened. Sweat began to trickle down. The gazes of the Raven group were fixed directly on the Count. His face started to show fear, his body trembling. The soldiers behind him also fell silent. Raven stood, holding his sword, pointing towards them. He added, If you think I am lying, ask your soldiers why they are no longer attacking. The Count's eyes widened, turning to anger. He turned to shout behind him, Unruly scum, capture them. The Count turned to the soldiers, yelling, What are you doing? The soldiers looked at each other, questioning. He continued to shout, Capture them now. The soldiers were also losing patience. Glancing at the Count yelled even louder. Do you not hear what I am saying? I order you to capture them. Raven stood behind, unusually silent. His face slowly turned dark, more ominous. He spoke up because you initiated this senseless battle. He continued, his voice cold. Countless villagers and soldiers have had to sacrifice. The images of people fleeing in panic, houses engulfed in flames, and abandoned children slowly arise in my mind. Now Raven was fully enraged, he said directly, even knowing the truth, you cannot justify your actions. The Count was terrified and shouted, interrupting his sentence, Shut up, shut up, shut up. The soldiers are nothing at all. The soldiers standing behind were also filled with fury. The Count continued to yell, But they are my property. The fear on the Count's face became increasingly evident. He kept yelling, The vermin mercenaries. Eklund heard him say that, his face darkened, his eyes burning with the desire to devour the Count. He quickly drew his sword from its sheath. In just a few seconds, Eklund had pressed the blade against the Count's throat. The Count tried to call out, Eek, but Eklund cut him off, his face filled with rage, saying, Shut your mouth immediately. You have no right to speak here. The Count glanced down at the sword at his throat, his whole body trembling, his face filled with fear. Behind him, Sol and Raven also joined in, ready to fight. Raven shut her eyes and called out loudly, Sol! She immediately understood Raven's signal. Sol spread her wings to fly up, lifting Raven into the air, and beneath her, a dragon tail appeared. The Count immediately gasped in surprise, unable to believe his eyes, and shouted, Wings? 3 blue diamonds containing energy appeared on her forehead, and Sol shone brightly under the night sky. The Count looked at her, his eyes wide, and exclaimed, So beautiful! Both of their faces were serious. Above her head were rings of golden light, one hand of Sol resting on Raven's shoulder, surrounded by streams of blue energy. In an instant, a massive green energy surged upward, enveloping both of them. The strong winds around caused many to shield their eyes. Jody asked, What is happening? The Count and his daughter were blown away by the wind. He shouted, Ah! A thick cloud of smoke filled the area, causing the soldiers behind to fall to the ground, with only Eklund remaining standing. The smoke gradually cleared, revealing a shadowy figure inside. The smoke slowly parted, and a pair of sky-blue eyes emerged. A gigantic white dragon appeared soaring in the sky. The 4 people below stared wide-eyed, shocked and panicked. Jody exclaimed in horror, A dragon! Scylla asked, Is Sol turning into a dragon? Tylene, her face filled with fear, realized, This is the white dragon. Sol transformed into a dragon, soaring up into the sky and looking down. The soldiers below were in a panic. Tylene continued, This is a creature that can single-handedly destroy an entire nation, the most powerful living being. At this moment, the Count was both frantic and fearful, realizing, So this creature. Eklund stepped forward, turned to face him. He knelt on one knee, bowing his head and face. The Count turned to him, gasping, thinking impossible. He couldn't accept it, thinking to himself, No way. Eren shed Raven's facade, standing beside Sol, while Eklund knelt and the Count trembled in fear. Sol looked at Eren, resting a hand on her face, observing them. The Count shouted, Duke White Dragon, Eren Pendragon. Eren's face was directed straight at him. White Dragon roared, a strong wind blowing out, causing the Count to be thrown far away. Eklund and Eren remained steady. He was blown away, falling and rolling multiple times on the ground like a struck ball. The Count flipped over, face planting into the ground. He looked up, his whole body shaking, his face bruised from the fall, murmuring, Eek. The Count looked ahead and saw a crowd of villagers armed with weapons standing before him, their faces ablaze with anger. The villagers glared at him, furious. The Count shouted insults at them. What, you peasants? One of the villagers standing nearby stepped forward and struck him with the hoe. The Count screamed in pain. 2 others rushed in. One wearing a hat shouted, Because of the battle you started, my home has been destroyed. The long-haired man also said, We will not endure this any longer. A bunch of people from behind surged forward, beating him. They shouted in unison, Die, you disgusting pig. The Count's screams echoed. Eh. The hooves struck his face directly, their anger erupted. He pleaded with the soldiers, Please, someone save me. It hurts so much. My loyal knights, my soldiers. There was a lot of blood beneath him, but they were still not appeased, continuing their relentless attack. The Count cried out, Help me. But the soldiers turned a blind eye to him. Eklund stood watching them and said, It is finally over. Eren replied, Yes. His face remained fixed ahead as he added, At least this much. The sun began to set behind the mountains. Sol, in the form of a dragon, spread his wings and stood gazing at Eren. He continued, We've managed to save a little for Sisek. Sol stood behind in the form of White Dragon, roaring as gusts of wind swept past. The moon began to rise. Inside the inn, Jody lifted his mug of beer and spoke, Yet he is the Duke of White Dragon Pendragon. The three of them sat drinking beer in the inn. Jody leaned back in his chair and continued. I always thought he couldn't be an ordinary person, but Sella laughed cheerfully, responding, a powerful and handsome master, I'll have to work for him. Gus said seriously to her, how foolish. If you want to follow him, then go ahead. We're mercenaries, people who don't bow to anyone. Gus looked towards the door and added, and besides, we probably won't see him again. Scylla rested her arms on the table, her expression somewhat sad. Jody had a similar look on her face. The door suddenly swung open and a foot stepped inside. All three of them widened their eyes, looking towards the door, mouths moving in disbelief. Eren, Sol, and Eklund entered. Eren glanced at them and said, I thought everyone would be here. Jody, Scylla, and Gus called out in unison, Pendragon. Eren walked over to them and pulled out a chair to sit. Joey, looking puzzled, asked, Aren't you going to the noble reception for Sisek? Eren replied, After hearing their flattery, I suddenly lost my appetite. He continued, So I came here to drink with all of you. Moreover, I have something I need to ask of you all. As time passed, the sky grew distinctly darker. Sol and Eklund sat on the balcony of the inn waiting for Eren. When Eren opened the door and walked in, he passed by, and Eklund asked, Have you finished what you needed to do? Eren replied, Yes. He stood near the railing, gazing at the sky with a thoughtful expression, somewhat pensive. Eren looked down and asked Eklund, You have made it possible for me to pick up the sword and fight again, Isla. Everything is thanks to you. Eklund turned around, her eyes wide in surprise as she looked at Eren. Eren placed his hand on the railing and continued. After I woke up from the coma, I felt like I had no reason to live. His expression was hazy, and he continued. I didn't understand who I was. Eklund looked at him seriously. Eren continued. But when I was struck by someone, I remembered that moment. Eklund, in anger, grabbed his shirt and scolded. Keep talking. I have realized something. He smiled and looked up at the sky, his expression as if he had discovered himself. I am not anyone else but myself. Eren went on to say, and Eren Pendragon. The night sky was full of stars, accompanied by the twinkling lights. Eren spoke. I am also the ruler of the Pendragon Duchy. I have sworn to obtain what I deserve. Eklund smirked. He stepped closer to Eren, placed his hands on the railing, closed his eyes, and said directly, If you stray off course again, I'll just hit you. Eklund glanced over, smiling brightly. Because I am your sword. Eren smiled happily as well. Suddenly, the sound of wings flapping echoed. Both turned to look and saw Sol spreading her wings and flying straight up into the sky. Eren and Eklund followed her with their gaze. Sol flew for a while and then became distant. Eren spoke. She. He turned to look at the table where Sol had been sitting. On the table were 2 glasses of water and a beer bottle already placed there. Both were completely unaware of when Sol had taken the water. Eren said, Sol. She flew for a moment and then suddenly smiled. Both sat under the moonlight, enjoying the bottle of beer together. Eren and Eklund clinked their glasses. The sun gradually began to rise. Below, the townspeople were watching over the mountains. They joyfully shouted. The black-haired boy exclaimed, It seems Duke Pendragon has arrived in Sisek. The girl beside him added, Thanks to him, the disgusting fat pig Count Breshida is dead. From a distance, a few horses began to approach. Everyone eagerly awaited, with some exclaiming, I will forever remember his great figure. He is coming. Scylla smugly laughed, ho ho ho, and said, It seems everyone has been waiting a long time for a hero to save them from the hands of the foolish ruler. She sat proudly on her horse, raising her sword high, and declared, I am the only woman of warrior Pendragon, the female warrior on the battlefield Scylla. She moved ahead of everyone, laughing loudly. Jody and Eren followed behind. Joey, with a tired expression, said, Hey, Scylla, you are overdoing it. Eren laughed and brushed it off. Let her be. Having her around is fun. He added, I am always stuck between these 2 silent people, so it's become maddeningly boring. Sol of Eklund Leslie responded to him. Eren looked over and said, I am very grateful that you accepted my invitation. Jody was a bit surprised but replied, Nothing. I wish I could do more. On the contrary, thank you for... Eren continued, If it were for your help, capturing Love Tillin would have been impossible. Tillin was bound and sitting on a horse being led away. He added, praising them, You all are strong enough, and above all, you are teammates who have faced life and death with me. Eren pointed at Tillin and said, And this night Valis here values you all very much. Valis' expression was blank and disheveled. Jody looked at him, feeling a bit scared. Suddenly, Jody looked over at Gus. Gus joyfully added, I didn't think someone who hates nobles as much as you would join us, Gus. Gus replied, Because of the terrible relationship between us. Gus added, Besides, the image from earlier flashed in his mind, Eren sitting across from them, bowing his head. All 3 were taken aback. Gus thought to himself. When he bowed his head to ask us like that, Gus felt a bit happy, thinking, I can sense that he is not like those filthy nobles out there. Gus looked over at Eren. An old man standing below looked up, whispering, Eren Pendragon. He stroked his chin and thought, I feel like I've seen him somewhere before. The image of a black-haired man appeared behind Eren. The man smiled brightly in the sunlight. The old man suddenly called out, Lord Greyvault. His eyes began to well up with tears. The three of them walked past the old man, who looked after them. Eren turned back and happily said, Let's return to the Pendragon territory. The sea shifted to another place where Duke Oranges sat on his throne, surrounded by several girls standing close by. Baltai knelt below. He sat on the throne and said, Not only has my son been defeated, but you also failed to complete the task. Baltai bowed his head in apology. Please punish me. Oranges replied, It's all right, I like strong individuals. If we have to face someone strong like that, we must find a way to cope. Oranges suddenly laughed, however, he continued, Did we plan the next step in the strategy already? He smiled wickedly. He looked up and said, I am very glad to hear this. The Sea Dragon King, sitting on his chair, resting his chin on his hand, with two girls kneeling beside him, looked at Duke Oranges. The Sea Dragon King smirked, Duke White Dragon, Eren Pendragon. Recently, that name has been quite troubling me. On top of the chair was a stone dragon coiled around it. In the Pendragon territory, at Conrad Castle, a luxurious white castle, Lindsay and Eren were delighted to hear that Eren was coming back. Eren said, Really, is my brother coming back? Tada sat by the window reading the letter and said, He has completed his mission in Sissuk, so he will be home soon. Helena and Mia were also happy to hear the news. Eren grabbed Lindsay's hand, shouting, Did you hear that, Lindsay? Just as expected from your brother. Helena sat in her chair, secretly happy, thinking, Eren. Barrio, Reed, and the black-haired soldier faced off against Mark, while the soldiers stood around watching the fight. Mark smiled, holding his sword pointed at them. The three of them charged at once, shouting, Ha! Mark also rushed forward, his expression more serious. In the blue sky above, the sounds of wooden swords clashing echoed below. Mark completely overwhelmed them, knocking away 3 wooden swords from their hands at once. The soldier standing outside exclaimed, Wow! Everyone stared in amazement. Reed, shaking hands, said, He's gotten stronger. He held the wooden sword proudly, boasting of his achievements. Of course, I was the one who killed all those pirate orcs in the battle on the Silvo coast. Mark placed one hand on his hip and added, It seems you all have finally realized the true strength that comes from serving the young master for many years. He turned around, his face full of pride, and declared, As for myself now, I could even defeat someone like Isla. The soldiers cheered, Wow! Karna and the long-haired guy looked at them with exasperation. The people around joined in, praising him, just as expected from the captain. Suddenly, a hand clapped. Mark looked over. Vincent, dressed in a black shirt, also praised Mark. I failed to recognize how important you are, Captain. Considering the 3 knights you defeated, that is truly amazing strength. Mark turned back to look at the man and politely replied, Oh, thank you for the compliment. I don't think I've met you before. Are you a visitor? He placed his hand on his chest and bowed slightly, introduced himself. I'm here at the suggestion of Lord Pendragon. My name is Vincent Ron. Mark and the 2 people behind him were surprised to see him. As Vincent was bowing, he suddenly looked up. Mark approached with a wooden sword over his shoulder and replied, I see. So you must have heard from the Lord then. He looked puzzled. Mark suddenly laughed. Here, both political and military matters are not important. We will take the lead and rebuild this country. Mark suddenly pointed the wooden sword at Vincent and yelled in anger, But you're here, proud that the Lord chose you. Vincent's expression was one of confusion. A wooden sword fell at his feet. Vincent looked down and forced a smile. What? What is this baseless accusation? Mark, his face full of killing intent, spoke up. Pick up the sword. It's time for your entrance exam. He picked up the sword, pointed it straight at Vincent, and exclaimed, Show your true power now. Everyone cheered and shouted. Vincent stood there with a blank expression, looking at them like they were fools. He recalled Eren's smiling face during their conversation. Mark also took a fighting stance. Vincent picked up the wooden sword and said, Am I really the cunning old fox here? He held the sword, a smile spreading across his face as he looked over. All right, I agree. In another location, the sun shone brightly in the blue sky. In the territory of Count Sarah, the streets below were bustling with people. Everyone was out for work, going to the market. Suddenly, a voice rang out. Ha ha, fantastic. The big city is really something. Scylla held a handful of jewels, excitedly saying, Look at these jewels. I bought them. Gus picked up a few, examined them, and replied, More than half of them are fake. Scylla's expression immediately turned anxious. Jody and Eklund turned to look at them. Scylla's voice echoed, "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Eren walked ahead, his face showing little interest. Jody approached to ask him, "Why do you look so gloomy, sir?" Jody added, "I know for you, a big city like this is just an ordinary sight. Not like that." Eklund also looked over. Jody asked again, "So why do all of us have to be here?" Eren looked up seriously to meet Count Sarad at the Count's castle. Both the Count and Luna were surprised to see Eren. He stood before them, wearing a suit, radiating an aura. Eren carefully bowed and politely greeted. "It's been a while since I've seen Count and Lady Luna Sarad." The Count was a bit surprised to see how much he had changed. He thought to himself, "I've heard the rumors, but I didn't expect Eren Pendragon to change this much." Luna was equally surprised. She looked at him, her face slightly flushed, thinking, something has changed. She watched Eren adjusting his collar, thinking further. After loose, he has changed once again. After a while, dusk approached and the sky turned to twilight. The three of them sat together. Luna and the Count sat on one side, while Eren sat opposite them. The Count spoke. "I've heard about your activities in Sisek. Just thinking about the fact that you caught the one behind the assassination plot against the first prince." Eren also picked up the teacup and replied, "He is not the main culprit. There is someone stronger behind him pulling the strings. I cannot say more about it here, but soon I will set out for the capital and explain everything to the Emperor. After that, perhaps everything will be clarified." The Count also replied, "I understand." Count Sarah then asked, "But will everything be all right? Count Brescia also died because of this incident. You won't escape suspicion either." He took a sip of tea and spoke as if everything were quite casual. "An incompetent ruler deserves to die." The Count and Luna were startled upon hearing this. They were surprised by his words. The Count, in shock, stammered, "Could it be that you? This goes against the laws of the Empire." He set the teacup down and stated plainly, "He is a tyrant and an oppressor. He was dealt with by his own people, and if the Empire attacks those people..." He clasped his hands together, a powerful energy emanating from him, filled with fear. Eren spoke challengingly, "Then they will face my invasion, for I will resist them." Count Sarad turned to stone with those words, his whole body shaking. Luna was also surprised to hear it. After they finished talking, Luna and Eren stepped out onto the balcony to chat. He called her name. "Luna." She stood beside him, silently listening. Eren looked down below, where the cities, big and small, were bustling. He continued, "Your territory is developing quite well, even more than the Pendragon territory right now." She looked at him in surprise. Eren lowered his gaze and added, "I'm sorry about the loose incident. I didn't listen to you." She flushed and exhaled. "It's all right, it's just that." He interrupted her. "I didn't understand back then." Moments from the other day flashed in his mind as he sat at the go board. Eren added, "What does my life and his life mean?" His hand moved a piece. "What am I living for?" He straightened up, placing his hand on the railing, but now I can say, images from his experiences. Helena tightly embracing him, the moment Eklund yelled at him, the moment Sol smiled happily, and when the battle in Sisek ended. Eren stated openly that I will live under the name Eren Pendragon. He added, "And in the name of a Pendragon, my domain will be a place where everyone will live a rich life." The afternoon sunlight shone through every corner of the city and the castle. Eren declared, "That is the solution I found in Sisek and is my answer." Eren slightly lowered his head and said softly, "At that time, I did not understand." When Helena embraced him tightly, he wondered, "What does my life and hers mean?" When he had to helplessly slump down, he asked himself, "What do I live for?" Saying this, Eren tightened his grip on the railing and continued. But now, standing before Luna's curious expression, Eren spoke, "I can say that I will live under the name Eren Pendragon." Eren's tone was more serious than ever, "And in the name of a Pendragon, my domain will be a place where everyone will live a happy life. That is the solution I found in Sisek and is my answer." After hearing Eren's words, Luna remained silent for a few seconds. Then Eren continued, "But about what you said..." Luna immediately interrupted him. "I understand." She turned to look at Eren and asked, "At this moment, you're lost in the intoxication of love, right?" Caught off guard by the accurate observation, Eren fell silent. He replied awkwardly, "Well," but once again, Luna interrupted him, so Luna smiled, placing her hand over her chest, suggesting to him, "How about a secretary like that?" Eren was taken aback, wide-eyed, stumbling over his words as he didn't understand Luna's intention, Luna responded, "If I learn how, even I can do it, and I can also be nearby to help you." Hearing this, Eren felt that the girl before him misunderstood him a bit, so he intended to refuse. "No, that's not..." Luna expressed her feelings. "Your words have moved me." Then, facing Eren directly, Luna sincerely said, I also want to live as my true self, a life where I don't have to sit and wait for a prince on a white horse. I want to try things for myself. Luna turned her head towards the sunlight, sighed, and said, "So you don't have to worry, it's okay." Luna's face turned slightly red. She whispered, "Because today is not that day, right?" Eren was a bit surprised and did not respond to Luna's words. The fresh morning at the castle, Eren excitedly spread her arms and ran forward, calling out, "Brother." She hugged Eren tightly with a happy tone. "It's been so long since I last saw you." Then followed an emotional reunion of the couple, Eren and the others. Helena was among them, but she felt a little surprised. Her blue eyes widened as she looked ahead, thinking, this atmosphere. See, Eren smiling with his daughter made Helena feel stunned. The boy had changed again. At that moment, Eren also caught Helena's gaze directed at him. Helena was startled to come face to face with Eren. He released his daughter and approached his mother. Eren gently spread his arms and pulled Helena into an embrace, smiling softly as he said, "I'm back, mother." Helena was a bit taken aback by this action, but it seems she also sensed the warmth from Eren, which moved her to tears. The two hugged each other in peace. Helena's warm voice responded to her son's words, "Welcome back, Eren." In front of the castle gate, Eren had gathered all his warriors. Killian was the first to speak. "It's been a while since I last saw you, young master." Eren smiled, looking at Killian, and continued, "While you were absent, your loyal servant Killian has led and protected the entire team perfectly." Then he pulled the young man Ron from behind, standing him in front of Eren to show off. "And another enthusiastic recruit has joined us." The corner of Ron's mouth curved up slightly. Killian added more about Ron after spending some time with him. "Just as you said, young master, this guy is indeed arrogant, but his skills need no debate." And then, Killian didn't forget to boost his own ego, though he still falls short of my skills, being young and all. Elkin's expression was somewhat surprised when he saw Ron. Killian patted his chest, laughing. That was an interesting match, but he surrendered in the middle of it. "The difference lies in the endurance training, you know." Ron modestly replied, "After all, I am just an ordinary resident. I can never match the captain here." Elkin had been staring at Ron without blinking. Then he shifted to a more guarded attitude towards Ron. Ron knew this early on, yet he maintained a smile on his face. Eren, on the other hand, only smiled calmly and said nothing. When the wine was poured into the glass, Eren finally spoke, "You really are still a cunning old fox right until the end." Facing Ron in their private space, Eren did not hesitate to engage in a friendly conversation to hide his true strength. Ron drank while replying, "Aren't you really the old fox here?" Eren did not understand what he was talking about. Ron put down his wine glass, smirking as he asked, "Didn't you want to test me?" Eren was also no stranger to this, his smile indicating acknowledgement. Ron recounted his match against Killian, a suspicious rookie with a mysterious background who had defeated the Knight Captain. "Others will definitely be talking about it," Ron said. He continued, "The real reason I surrendered was that I didn't want your honor to be affected. I had concealed my skills enough to compete fairly with him." Ron stroked his chin, muttering, "You truly have a good team of knights." Eren calmly asked further, "Do you like the Pendragons?" Ron hummed a bit and then replied, It depends on you." Eren hesitated for a moment. Ron had already finished the drink in his glass. He raised the transparent glass and said, "Anyway, he picked up the beer bottle and assessed. A very special flavor in the beer produced here, but for me, that's not enough." Then Ron pointed at the beer bottle, lowered his voice, and asked, "Do you think why?" Eren understood very well this expression of Ron. While he maintained a friendly smirk on the outside, inside he thought, "Here we go. The test of the master of the Twilight Tower, Vincent Ron." The atmosphere became silent for a moment. Eren thought for a while before asking back, "What is this territory lacking?" "That's your question, right?" Ron poured the beer while joking. "Guess." Then Ron opened his amber eyes wide and coldly said, "How does the beer here compare to the beer we've had in Luce?" Eren could imagine Ron pointing a sword in front of him. He stared at the tip of the sword without blinking, maintaining his calm until the last moment. Eren furrowed his brow, his smile full of implications. It seemed that this sword could stab him at any moment, and that question made him feel as if he were fighting Ron. Eren calculated silently. One misstep could lead to disaster, and he knew that Ron would not be on his side. Recalling the past, Ron had once asked a similar question directly. The beer here compared to the beer at the harbor. The difference between Pendragon and Luce. The missing element here. Eren closed his eyes and thought quietly. After analyzing the issue, he opened his mouth to respond. "It is the people. The biggest difference is the population." After hearing Eren's answer, Ron was somewhat surprised because he had not considered this scenario. Eren continued, "Although Pendragon has a vast territory, its population is sparse. Normally, this land should have enough space for more than 100,000 people to live, but now the population is only a mere 30,000. As for Luce, because it has a harbor, the flow of people entering the city is massive, which represents a stark contrast to Pendragon. Eren's hands tightened together on the table, his voice lowered slightly. Without enough people concentrated here, there will be no technological progress or military strength. Therefore, the value of the beer will remain as it is. Population is also considered a strength of a territory. Eren's words were sincere. He admitted that it was something that Pendragon currently lacked. Ron suddenly spoke up. It's like the traditional sake of a region. Culture is something very important. Simply put, the strength of a territory lies in the products it generates. Eren sighed with relief as Ron seemed satisfied with his answer. Ron recounted what he knew. From what we have investigated, this place is developing very rapidly thanks to you, Eren Pendragon, who has led and governed it. Immigration is also gradually progressing. However, Ron reminded Eren that many migrants were still living in poverty. Hearing this, Eren lowered his head slightly and expressed his opinion. Then we must help them first, for the benefit of the territory. Ron was curious about his plan and asked how. Eren felt as if Ron was threatening him, indicating that he still did not truly trust him. Eren thought for a moment before answering. Create fertile land and give them the right to cultivate it. By doing so, we can naturally turn them into our people, while simultaneously increasing the food supply. It's a twofold benefit. Ron looked at Eren for a long time, continuing to listen to him speak. Eren continued, but this strategy has a problem. Ron took a sip of his drink, noticing Eren seemed confused, and encouraged him. Please continue. Eren raised his head and replied, it's safety. If thousands of people come here to farm the land, villages will spring up like mushrooms. We don't have enough soldiers to protect them from bandits and monsters. Ron suddenly thought of a method but hesitated to express it, so he suggested, what if you let the Griffins handle this? This time, Eren felt Ron's sword was only a short distance from his neck. As soon as he said something unpleasant, he would immediately lose. Eren spoke. No matter how tame they may be, their nature is still that of monsters. If we truly want to turn them into our people, we must let those they trust handle this like knights or mercenaries. Eren frowned slightly and continued. If we don't do this, they will feel they are not being treated like humans, but rather more like serfs. Ron was completely surprised by Eren's decision. However, he still let Eren continue to present his plans as they were here to escape poverty and the dream of a better life was waiting for them. Ron sighed and said, if we treat them like serfs, the stream of people coming here with dreams and ambitions will disappear. Eren replied, I have seen Sisek fall into that situation and also places where many nobles believed that using force to suppress them was the right thing to do. Eren's voice carried a tense tone. But if we do that, this territory will not become prosperous. A worm that has stepped on too much will eventually be dealt with by its own people. The more Ron listened, the more focused he became as the Lord truly represented all the people living in the same territory. The atmosphere turned silent. Ron's sharpened blade slowly faded away, finally disappearing as if satisfied with this explanation. The sunlight shone on the spot where Eren and Ron were sitting, clearly revealing who radiated a brilliant aura. Ron suddenly spoke. After meeting you again, I feel you have changed. Eren tilted his head and looked at him, then burst out laughing. Is that so? Ron firmly admitted, yes, but even if you have good intentions, it's useless without a plan. Eren replied, you're being too harsh. Ron casually picked up the beer bottle and said, if you were an ordinary person, I would freely flatter you to take advantage of you. He gulped down the entire beer bottle while saying, but I actually intend to have a serious conversation with you. Eren waited for Ron to finish digesting all that beer. Some beer spilled from Ron's mouth. Then he wiped away that flaw from the corner of his excitedly curved mouth, because I still want to enjoy this nice beer. Eren felt incredibly joyful that Ron accepted. He suggested, I want to hear your thoughts. Ron was now completely facing Eren like a friend. He replied, I have the authority to handle immigration issues, and I also intend to attract more people to the territory. Eren nodded. I understand. Ron smirked and continued. That answer is also part of what you just said, Pendragon. A griffin was soaring in the sky, letting out a cry. At that time, Elkin was riding on the back of the creature, soaring back and forth. Behind them was another flock of griffins also following along. Below, the goblins were laboring with heavy loads. Nearby, centaurs were assisting with the work. Together, they were helping humans build to serve the kingdom. When people saw this, they all looked astonished. Amazing. One person exclaimed, indeed, this once shabby village of York has now transformed into a city. Returning to the conversation between Ron and Eren, Eren curiously asked, are you saying the answer lies in what I just said? Ron nodded, yes. He had a plan. We will undertake a large-scale construction project. Eren didn't quite understand what Ron meant and asked, construction. Ron explained in detail. Now we will address the employment of those impoverished immigrants. However, instead of giving them land to do as they please, assigning them construction work will be better. Since this is a large-scale project, we will need thousands of people like them, and we can also gather them in one place. Eren excitedly continued, "If we do that, we can significantly reduce the number of soldiers needed to protect them." Ron went on to explain, "And because it is a large-scale project, we will definitely need more people." The smile on Ron's face grew wider. One person will lead to another. This will lead to the formation of a free city, a city that welcomes everyone, regardless of citizenship, ethnicity, or species. If all goes well, the population will grow at a rapid pace. In the morning at the kingdom, inside the meeting room of York City, a male resident stood up on behalf of everyone to speak to Eren's group. He presented that, in the area of my land, there is a nearby forest that has many kinds of good wood. Please prioritize us in this expansion of the city. Another man had a similar wish. I want to open a pub for all the immigrant workers. After all, nothing beats a beer after a tiring day. He continuously asserted that they would work very hard, so by the end of the day, they would need a place to relax. Eren smiled to himself. He finally understood what he meant. Ron had once said, "One person will lead to another. If there are enough people, the demand for new businesses will rise." Eren remained silent to let him continue, because from now on, that was what mattered. "We will sign contracts with the merchants gathered here for trading," Eren said. He represented the other two standing up, addressed the crowd. "From the bottom of my heart, I am very grateful to all of you for not minding the long journey to be here. This city of York is a free city, regardless of race, species, or nationality." Eren signaled for Luna to hold up a red bag. He said, however, if everyone wants to do business here, then everyone needs to follow this rule. The gold coins inside the red cloth bag spilled out. Eren continued, "That is, everyone must use these long coins." The other merchants were stunned to hear this. In fact, it was Ron who had advised Eren to use this method beforehand. At that time, he had been a bit panicked. Create a new and independent currency? Ron calmly replied, "Of course the Empire will not accept this. However, if the Pendragon family goes in the right direction, it will be fine. Thanks to your battle at Luce, the Prince of the Empire and is very grateful to you. And because you captured the mastermind behind the assassination plot against the first Prince of the Empire in Sisek. Furthermore, the mastermind was the Sea Dragon King, so in the battle against the Arangis family, the strength of the Pendragon family is essential." Eren thought it seemed reasonable. Ron continued to explain, for all these reasons, they would have no choice but to comply with it. And if we trade with the Empire, using this currency, the Pendragon family will gain even more influence. Ron seriously advised Eren, for you to achieve what you desire in the Empire, you need to have more power. Eren sat alone, determined to execute Ron's plan with unwavering resolve. They would have to face our attack because we would fight side by side with the Empire. Eren lowered his head, his expression extremely tense. He clenched his fist and replied, "Certainly, however, no matter how many mines there are in this territory, it'll not be enough to mint all that gold, right?" Ron's eyes widened in surprise. Then he burst out laughing. "Ha ha! You don't need to worry about that, because the money will." In the afternoon, the sunset was brilliant. Eren held a coin in his hand and examined it, mixed with contemplation. "I wonder if this currency can be used." The merchant who had just been discussing matters with Eren was now returning. He walked while saying, "Compared to the Empire's currency, this coin is made up of only about 70% gold. Moreover, it is also much smaller. Once we finish this project, a low-quality currency like this will disappear anyway." Suddenly, the friend next to him responded, "I think it's the Empire's currency that will disappear." They looked at him in shock. It was the head of Giovanni, the fourth largest trading association in the Empire, Toast Giovanni. Toast held the coin and assessed it objectively. Because it is compact, it is easier to carry. And it doesn't matter how much gold it contains, its value is still equivalent to that of the Empire's currency. So in terms of convenience value, both coins are the same, but the Empire's coin is heavier, making it harder to carry. Toast glanced at the other merchants and smirked, asking, "So which currency will you choose to keep, and which will you spend?" Everyone was thoroughly explained by Toast, so there was a bit of fear. In Ron's hand was the beer bottle he had drunk yesterday. He spoke up, "In the business world, there is a saying, the money that comes first is wise money. The value of money is determined by its circulation in the market. If we can make the Empire's currency used as an asset, sooner or later it will become like gold ore in the present. At that time, the market will be flooded with counterfeit currency." Luna was a bit worried and asked, "So basically, will the low-quality ones take the place of the high-quality ones?" Ron smiled and nodded. "That's right. Just a piece of paper can make that happen. I believe so." Eren was still a bit skeptical. "Really?" Ron took a sip of beer and replied, Anyway, it's just theoretical. But in a future beyond our debts, perhaps there will be evidence proving that it's true. Eren was a bit surprised, almost falling over. He looked at Ron, beads of sweat running down. He felt goosebumps thinking about him. Even though I don't know what the future really holds, it's hard to believe that he can see so far and think so broadly. He really is a scary person. The gray sunset, Vincent Ron. While the other merchants were talking, Toast was thinking about the coins this time. To come up with a plan like this, the person carrying it out must be quite competent. So he has succeeded. Capture that cunning fox, Eren Pendragon. Toast clenched the coin in his hand and said, within a year, no, just half a year from now, it will make a big splash. He looked towards the sunset and exclaimed, the city of freedom, York. Just like the plan Vincent Ron outlined. Immigrants quickly flooded into York. The merchants really went to Luna to discuss matters. Everything he shared was fully listened to and recorded by Luna. At Eren's castle, Luna held a stack of papers in her hand, then looked up and said, this is today's business report from York. She placed the report on the table for both Eren and Ron to review. Eren picked it up and glanced through it. Then he turned to Ron and asked, is everything going as planned? Ron nodded, yes. Ron also did not forget to assess Luna's abilities. He remarked, she is truly very talented in this field. Luna smiled with joy, although she felt a bit shy. Ron continued, because the number of businesses has recently increased rapidly, but the two of us cannot handle all the work without your help. Luna replied brightly, thank you very much. After finishing her work, she left, leaving the two of them inside. The sound of the door closing echoed in their silence. Ron turned to Eren to ask about Luna. She's quite good, isn't she, Pendragon? Eren nodded in agreement, yes. At the construction site, an orc approached holding a piece of wood in his hand. He threw the piece of wood up and called out, hey, catch this, Pendragon. Because the vet threw it too hard, Eren had to catch it himself. He also shielded the others to avoid injury. Eren angrily shouted at the orc, you fool, if you throw it that hard. Orc replied, there's no other way. For us orcs, it's a piece of cake. Elkin was passing by on a griffin and saw Eren's group supporting each other in their work. He just watched but said nothing. The target was Eren. Ron and Luna sat under the bench, observing everything. She couldn't help but ask, but why is Eren doing that? Ron, sipping his beer, responded, that's a public image strategy. If he sweats with the workers, he will win the people's favor. As someone who would accompany them, Luna was at a loss for the ideas and attitude of this guy. Ron admitted, I suggested he do that. He glanced up at Eren, assessing, but it seems he's quite familiar with that work. Eren was conversing with everyone while maintaining a cheerful demeanor. In response to Ron's questioning, Eren also thought that in his previous life, he had helped a lot in the Veld family, and his mother, the woman who often came to see him every lunchtime. She always brought a basket of hot, delicious bread along with a radiant smile on her face. Eren slightly lowered his head, smiling softly, thinking, it's always like this. Suddenly, Lindsay's voice rang out, calling Eren everyone. She brought out a basket of nutritious sandwiches and said, it's lunchtime. So everyone sat down to have lunch together, chatting happily with each other. Eren tried a bite of Lindsay's sandwich and shared his thoughts. It's so good. Lindsay replied, well, I used to be a commoner, so I'm quite used to doing these things. The smile on Lindsay's lips was both gentle and sweet, and her hand had a scratch. Eren just looked at her without saying anything. Then she appeared before him, making him astonished. Lindsay was not much different from Eren's mother in his past life. The two stood looking at each other in the sunlight. While Eren was smiling in a daze at Lindsay, the scene of their intimacy caught Ron and Luna's attention. Ron chuckled softly, saying, I have a feeling I'm about to enjoy some good beer in this territory. Luna seemed surprised for a moment, then she also lowered her head, looking sad. Ron accidentally noticed her unusual expression. In the bright sky, Sol's figure appeared, surveying the entire city. She hovered in place and admitted, everything is changing. It's been a while since I arrived here from Pendragon. This place has remained the same for a long time. But after the agreement with Ray, the atmosphere around Sol seems to be improving. She closed her eyes, thinking of someone. What you think, Alex? Alex Pendragon. Meanwhile, on a mountain close to York City, a young man and his horse stood tall, observing the scene. He sighed in relief, finally arriving at the place he had always longed for, the Pendragon territory. He firmly gripped the sword at his side and declared, and right here, I, Leon John Bolt, shall become a proud and honorable knight. The smile on Leon's face was pure and sincere towards this goal. Next, Lindsay sold food to everyone with a cheerful and willing expression. Eren also lent a hand, and with positive energy, she kept encouraging everyone Pendragon territory is providing construction jobs for immigrants. You don't have to worry about food anymore. Instead of paying attention to what Eren was saying, it seemed that everyone was more focused on her appearance. So pretty, one person next to that guy admitted, Yeah, she really is, the other replied. On Ron's side, the guy was eating soup while saying, just as I thought, Miss Eren is perfect for this task. She's doing very well. An elf behind Ron also expressed his opinion. She's doing great. It's a strategy to enhance our image. Humans are strange. Isn't she supposed to be ugly just like an elf? Someone else remarked. Ron sighed, that's insulting, don't you know? Eren eagerly offered food to everyone. Here, feel free to help yourselves. Leon took it and replied, thank you. His face slightly paled when he saw the bowl of soup. Eren encouraged Leon. It'll be okay. We'll provide jobs. Leon softly said, no bye. Eren accidentally noticed something on Leon, huh? She looked at the shiny object on Leon's hip. This person has a quite good sword. He also has a sense of style. Is he really an immigrant? While preparing to eat, a demon rushed towards the two of them. Leon and Eren were startled and turned around. Everyone shouted in panic at the sight of a zombie. At this point, the image of the zombie and the three-headed dragon resurfaced in their nightmares. The zombie in front of them seemed intent on harming Eren. Leon stood in front of her with his dazzling sword and shouted to watch out. But the result was that the zombie knocked to the side painfully. Eren was stunned and momentarily forgot that she was facing a bloodthirsty zombie. Ron stepped forward with incredible speed. He decisively severed the zombie's head and embraced Eren, protecting her. Everything ended in the blink of an eye. Ron tilted his head and remarked that this area was indeed dangerous, as it was stated on the information board that monsters like this could appear. Eren hurriedly thanked him. Thank you, Sir Ron. Then she quickly turned back upon seeing Leon lying there, shivering. Worried about what was wrong with him, she ran over to ask if he was okay. Leon lowered his head, his voice filled with despair. I truly feel pathetic. Eren comforted him. It's not like that. You're really brave. Ron also admitted, that's right. Thanks to you, I could make it in time to help. Upon hearing this, Leon panicked. That's still not enough. I came to Pendragon because I want to become a knight. Ron and Eren exchanged glances while Leon was crying heavily. At the castle, Ron took Leon to meet Eren and recounted everything. Eren, after confirming, welcomed him. Thank you for saving my sister. From what I hear, you took the test to be part of the White Dragon forces but failed. Leon nodded, slightly embarrassed. Yes. He wiped the tears from his eyelashes and expressed, I may not be able to become a knight, but meeting you is truly an honor. I have always admired you. Eren curiously asked, admired? Leon eagerly replied, yes, at the governor's party in Segunda. I was there and witnessed the attack by the pirate orcs. I hurried away as fast as I could. But you didn't. Implying Eren's bravery, Leon continued, you fought the pirates with everything you had, and you even defeated them. The hero of Luce. Leon's eyes lit up with pure hope. He was determined to say, I want to become a knight as strong as that, and I travel here from the Imperial capital just to achieve that. After hearing Leon's words, Eren nodded, I see. Then he asked further, since you're here, are you also a noble? Leon suppressed his earlier excitement, replacing it with surprise. Then Leon admitted, yes, my name is Leon John Bolt. I am the second son of Count John Bolt. Eren was genuinely curious about this family. Count John Bolt? I've never heard of him before. The atmosphere fell a bit silent as Leon felt somewhat embarrassed. He scratched his head, forced a smile, and said, the John Bolt family is a family of honorary counts, but we are merely jesters of the royal castle. Eren was astonished by Leon's words. Honorary count, you mean, do you have national-level talent? Leon smiled and nodded. Yes, my family has been proud of that lineage for generations, but the nobles in the royal castle do not think so. They simply see us as a joke, mere jesters. I cannot stand their disdain for us. Eren frowned, taken aback as he looked at him. Leon continued bitterly. That is why I want to become a knight, to fight like a warrior and restore the honor of the John Bolt family. At this point, Leon's hand trembled slightly and tightened into a fist. Eren silently understood Leon's feelings at that moment. So here is another victim of the heavy discrimination in the Empire, Eren thought to himself. Eren spoke up. Sir John Bolt, Leon, I want to see your performance. Leon did not know what Eren meant and looked confused. Eren was firm in his request. Show me. Levi stared at him in silence for a moment, then agreed. I understand. As he tossed his cloak aside, Leon's eyes changed. He showcased his agility by lifting one leg high, his body bending at the joints. Finally, Leon stuck out his tongue, making a ridiculous clown face. His posture looked more awkward than ever, but it also made the viewer like Eren filled with anticipation. Leon's supporting hand bent slightly down before jumping up, bringing his entire body along. Leon leaped high and performed a somersault. The movement was graceful, and he landed softly. At the same time, the cloak that had just been thrown up was also brought down by Liam as he bowed, signaling the end of the performance. Ron and Eren were so astonished that they had to cover their mouths to avoid screaming. Eren silently watched Leon, not missing a single move. He slowly stood up and said to Leon, "It's true that you might not become a knight, but I know someone who could develop your talent." The other three were all surprised to hear this. Eren closed his eyes and thought of someone, the person who taught him martial arts in his past life, the one who had fought alongside him on the battlefield, his master. Raksha is the black Argos if it's a person he can develop your talents. Eren recognized Leon's talent, his agility surpassing that of an ordinary person, especially his balance and jumping ability. Eren smiled and proposed to Leon John Bolt, you should become a fighter. Leon was taken aback by Eren's words, his face flushed with emotion. What a cool warrior. As night fell, the conversation between Ron and Eren resumed. So, you and Leon will go to the capital together? Ron asked. Leon nodded, yes. And in the meantime, we might find someone who could become his master. Ron anxiously asked, is that okay? This trip is very important to us. There are many objectives to accomplish, like the reward for punishing Love Tylene and granting the Pendragon a license. Ron took a sip of beer, furrowed his brow, and continued. And Love Tylene's escort team is about to set off. It's too dangerous. Eren slightly bowed his head and added, that's why we have to do some things. I've heard news from Karta and the orcs. Part of the zombies and demons near the tomb we fought before has come back to life. This means the lich we defeated back then is still roaming out there. Ron spoke in a lower tone, so the zombies that attacked Miss Eren yesterday were? Eren nodded, probably. Ron suddenly exclaimed, even if you have memories with the White Dragon, he still hasn't lost all his power. Eren voiced his speculation. It seems that someone is behind this. Perhaps it is a creature that can resist even dragons. Night fell and the castle was dark. Eren lay down on the bed, staring up at the ceiling, and fell asleep. He accidentally heard some noise and jumped up. A girl was standing outside the door. Eren recognized her soul. Eren invited her inside and said, I haven't seen you in a while. What's up? Sol replied, I'm recovering my magical energy at the base, and outside Pendragon's territory. I have to stay in human form, which consumes a lot of magical energy. Eren was a bit stunned and at a loss for words. He stammered, why didn't you mention this before? If I had known. Sol lowered her face and answered, because I wanted to be by your side. Eren fell into a state of immobility. Sol looked up, facing him, and asked, are you happy? Eren decisively replied, no. What if not? Sol asked back. However, at this point, he hesitated for a moment, remembering before Sol was the one who stood by him, sharing both joy and sorrow when they were in Sisek. She was always the one who cared for him whenever he was his most exhausted. Sol was the kindest and gentlest woman. Eren slightly furrowed his brow. He spoke gently. You took care of me in Sisek. Sol replied with a calm smile. There's no need to apologize. Our souls are connected, and my fault is when you go against what you once were. Eren listened silently as Sol expressed everything. Recalling the past, countless people had spilled blood before. The bodies lay grotesquely on the ground, motionless. Meanwhile, the White Dragon continuously absorbed their blood as power. Eren asked, you don't have them, do you? What will happen? Sol replied, I don't know. Any magic that can turn back time, I currently don't know of any such magic. And if it exists, it requires a vast amount of mana and a special place to hold that mana. A dragon vein, and my life as the chief of the dragon clan for such a thing to happen. Eren himself had to admit this. Indeed, the White Dragon at that time did not fight with all its might, and it took its own life before me under the bright sunlight. Just like Eren Pendragon in my previous life, Sol said, at that moment he wore a warrior's outfit facing the White Dragon. Eren replied with a heavy heart, I want to go back to the past. Sol completely empathized with Eren's feelings. Then she stood up and said goodbye. That's why I have to go. Sol looked out the window and continued, dying then, on the Lobtane step. Sol transformed into a dragon and soared into the sky, parallel to the moon. The next morning, the carriage carrying Eren's brute began to leave the castle. Up on the upper floor, no one knew that Luna was watching them. Her gaze was both sad and hopeful. At that time, Sol was also high in the sky, looking towards the horizon. Inside the carriage, Eren, Leon, Eren, and Lindsay were happily chatting with each other. Only Eren sat in silence, thinking about something throughout the journey. In Alice's territory, the battle festival in the arena seemed to be exploding. Eder, who was considered a promising figure in this tournament, was lying shivering on the ground, his face covered in a tangle of wounds after the brawl. The broken arm made Eder groan in pain. Everyone appeared astonished. Oh my, thinking about the third son of Count Luver. Holy eyes, Sir Eder has been beaten to a pulp like this. Everyone's gaze turned to the main character, wondering, who is he? Who is that mercenary? He exuded a fierce aura with overwhelming strength and a terrifying killing intent. The referee announced the winner is the warrior Argos. Argo's eyes narrowed, as if the hatred inside him had not been satisfied. The girls in Eren's group couldn't help but marvel at the beauty of this land. "Wow, it's beautiful," Eren exclaimed. "Alice's territory, the galaxy city, filled with flowers and liveliness, a place where people gather in large numbers to exchange love and receive fortune." Eren walked through, observing for a while, then thought to himself, the great territory of Alice with a city like this, they will soon be on par with the Empire. Eren couldn't help but exclaim, "There are so many people here." Levan answered her question. "Because they hold a festival once a year, it has become a tourist city. I have come here many times to improve my skills." Everyone burst into laughter. Then, the two girls in the group with shining eyes and mischievous mouths begged Leon, "I also want to see Leon's skills." Eren nodded eagerly, "Me too." Leon was a bit surprised. After that, he finished chewing the apple in his mouth and said, "Phew." Then just for a moment, Leon borrowed a few apples to perform. The two girls were very much looking forward to his show. Leon adjusted the position of his eyes and then tossed the apples back and forth. He used his shoulders to flip them up and down while keeping both hands clasped behind his back, and not a single apple fell. Everyone around applauded in unison. "Whoa, he didn't even use his hands. That guy is impressive." In the final act, Leon kicked both the shoe and the apple high into the air. At the same time, he flipped over in a flexible and smooth manner. Leon kicked the apple to the side. Eren and Lindsay were both amazed. Leon landed safely on the ground, believing that his performance had been a success. However, everyone's gaze was directed in the opposite direction. Leon noticed something unusual and looked over. An apple had hit a passing knight. Leon quickly ran out to bow his head and apologize. After that, he felt something heavy resting on him. Looking over, he realized that Eren was casually sitting on him. Eren glared at Leon and said, "Food is not something to waste." Leon trembled and replied, "I'm sorry." Everyone in this neighborhood was very friendly and noisy. Eren's group went on a tour after Leon was frightened. Lindsay looked around with a bewildered expression. "But are there really that many strong people here?" Lindsay asked. Eren replied, "It's because today is the day of the fighting festival." Eren looked at him with curiosity, and Leon whispered, "Yes, I completely forgot about that." Suddenly, Leon remembered something. He turned to Eren, who was losing enthusiasm, and asked, "Aren't you planning to participate?" Seeing Leon's excitement, Eren could only respond helplessly, "Yes." Inside, he thought, however, "I wonder if Argos heard me say that. In my previous life, I had heard about him. So does he." At the highest castle of the Alice territory, Count Louver angrily struck the armrest of his chair and growled, "This is truly humiliating." His whole body trembled with rage. He was none other than Count Louver, the lord of the Alice territory. He berated his son, who had just lost. For generations, the Louver family had been famous for producing renowned individuals. Yet Eder, who had been specially trained since birth and was now known as the Holy Eye in many countries, had suffered a crushing defeat. Eder listened with both physical and mental pain. Count Louver shouted as if this was unacceptable. "You lost miserably to an old man without a weapon. Don't you feel ashamed?" Both Eder and the guards following him wanted to apologize. Eder and a few soldiers stammered, We are sorry. This loss is unforgivable." Count Louver replied in a frenzy, "If he wins, then the Galaxy Knights of the Louver family will become a disgrace." Eder's throat was completely dry. He did not dare to say another word. Suddenly, a voice came from behind everyone. "You don't need to worry, father." The Eder group turned to look at the womanizer. He calmly said, "After all, you still have me." Both Count Louver and Eder referred to him as Morgan brother. Morgan arrogantly declared the #1 handsome man of Alice. He paused for a moment, then tossed the wine glass he was holding into the air. At the same time, he drew his sword from his side, making a flawless straight cup without even opening his eyes. The girl accompanying him quickly caught the wine glass. It seemed to remain intact, but unexpectedly, as soon as it touched her hand, it shattered into two. Count Louver and his brother Eder were amazed by that exceptional skill. Morgan emanated an aura around him and spoke arrogantly, "And I am the strongest knight in history. Isn't that right? I have your son, Morgan Louver," he said, and the most prestigious emblem on Morgan's cloak was likely the proof of his true power. After the semifinal, the referee announced the result. The winner is Argos, a middle-aged man who unflinchingly spills the blood of his enemies. On the other side of the arena, Sir Morgan Louver was the victor. Both of them would advance to the finals. In the legal domain of Alice, the barony of Dawson, a hurried voice reported, Lord Dawson, what do you think about that warrior? Let's hire him as the guard for our Dawson family. His abilities in battle ceremonies are quite impressive." However, Lord Dawson immediately interrupted. Enough. The two attendants persisted in their persuasion, but perhaps he could defeat the brilliant Sir Morgan. The Baron was too irritated and yelled, "Enough, leave at once." The two had to step outside in confusion. What is wrong with Lord Dawson? One of them wondered. Even though he is a knight, he hasn't been following the tournament. He hasn't practiced at all, as if he is no longer a noble. I can't fathom how someone as useless as him has so many titles. Meanwhile, inside Lord Dawson's room, he held a small insignia in his hand. It pointed to the girl in the painting, hanging on the Baron's wall. The insignia lit up for a moment, and Lord Dawson gradually fell into despair, clutching his face in heartbreak. Eren's group was at an inn not far from the arena. Levan asked Eren, "So my master will be at this inn, right?" Eren sighed. He thought to himself as his esteemed master from the previous life, Argos, here at this moment. Leon and Eren inadvertently witnessed a rather horrifying scene. They were a bit uncomfortable and exclaimed, "But what the hell happened to these people?" The thing is, as soon as they arrived, they saw a group of knights sprawled on the ground. Suddenly, one of the injured knights spoke up, "We came here to meet Argos." Leon was a bit taken aback. Huh? Oh, right. The knight probably knew that Eren's group had come here with the same intention. He advised, "Don't try to talk to him. Turn back while you still can. He is unreasonably strong, even if he doesn't give it his all. All the nobles and knights have come here to test his strength after witnessing his abilities at the festival, and they have all been beaten to a pulp like this." The girls were terrified upon hearing this. Liam could also imagine the monster the knights were talking about. In a panic, he asked Eren, "Will everything be all right?" Eren thought for a moment, then decided to respond, "There may be some situations beyond control. For now, just leave it to me." Very soon after that, Eren stood alone in front of Argos' room. Eren calmly knocked on the door and said, "Dear warrior Argos, I have something to discuss with you." There was silence inside for a moment. Then an annoyed voice replied, "Get lost if you don't want to lose one eye." Eren thought for a moment and then decided to continue. "I know about what happened to Gior and Raga." Immediately, the door swung open. A large hand shot out at incredible speed. Argos looked as if he were going insane and wanted to attack Eren. His face seemed ready to devour him. Before Eren could react, he was hit by a punch from Argos. Eren dodged while thinking, he is too fast. Argos delivered a kick, and Eren struggled to block it with his arm. But Argos caught his leg and twisted it down. His other leg also leaped up, spinning around to kick Eren in the face. Despite the pain, Eren managed to keep a smile on his face, happily thinking, "Just as expected, this is the technique that I cherish so much." Eren's gaze narrowed slightly in a frightening manner. Now he would use his third technique, the axe kick. Just as Eren had guessed, Argos had launched a kick straight up as if it were an axe. Thanks to his vague memory, Eren successfully dodged that sturdy axe kick. He turned and swung a slap to Argos' face. After realizing he had been caught in such a strange way, Argos' face showed undeniable surprise. Eren threw a knee strike. Then, Eren kicked Argos. He barely managed to defend himself in time. Eren used the same technique that Argos had used against him, wrapping his legs around Argos' arm and jumping up while spinning. Finally, he went for a kick, but Argos was too skilled with this move, so it was no surprise that he managed to evade it. The two of them created some distance. Argos was stunned as he looked at his forehead, realizing that Eren had indeed succeeded in injuring him. Argos suspiciously looked at Eren and asked, "Did you copy my technique?" "No, how do you know it?" Eren smiled lightly as he could finally speak calmly. Argos stood upright and asked him, "Who are you? How do you know about my daughter? Are you a partner of the vile Morgan Luver?" Eren replied, "I come here to change your fate, so I hope you will listen to me, to finally drive the last nail into the coffin of that monster in human skin. Not far away tonight, in a forest." In the forest, Morgan Luver, having satisfied his pleasures, laughed contentedly. "Ha, I can't possibly feel tired," he said, "from this bloody stroll." He looked at the girls on the ground, lying still in one place. Morgan wore a strange, arrogant smile and said, "Thanks to my beauty and intelligence, these foolish girls cannot resist my charm, and by wielding power, all my scandals and bad rumors have been covered up. Specifically, Morgan is the type of pervert who, once done, throws aside. He sees this as an achievement, as if everyone in the world were in his hands. He holds the symbols of decadent power." Ha ha ha. He turned back and whispered, "In 2 days after the final match, that old mercenary will dare to face my family." Morgan licked his blood-stained sword, confidently asserting, "That name will drown in a sea of blood." Argos sat cross-legged on the bed smoking. He spoke slowly. "You want me to believe what you say, even though I don't even know you?" Eren sincerely bowed his head and replied, "Honorable, extraordinary warrior Argos, I truly just want to help you." Argos exhaled smoke and the atmosphere became eerily quiet. Then he chuckled deeply. "That sounds truly touching. But will I bring back my daughters?" Eren was briefly taken aback by this request. Everyone knew this was impossible. Argos' gaze lit up ominously. His voice was both cold and filled with killing intent. They were raped and then murdered by that damnable, esteemed Morgan. Nothing can bring Jor and Raga back right. Argos continued, his voice filled with rage. Those damn noble names, their presence is already a representation of the law. Argos' voice gradually grew more angry. No matter what heinous crimes they commit, no one dares to act against them. If no one does anything, then I will. There was not a hint of jest in Argos' words. Eren completely empathized with his feelings at that moment. He admitted, "What you say is all true, but if you continue down this path, you will not achieve your goal of revenge. Instead, you will be seen as a criminal and banished in the Demon Legion." Argos merely frowned at Eren. Eren calmly explained, "If that happens, you will only crawl through the muck in countless battles, fighting in those meaningless wars, only to ultimately become a soulless corpse, expecting nothing but death." Argos said nothing, but it was clear that both of them shared a similar knot of feelings. Then he furrowed his brow tightly and spoke, "You talk as if you can see the future." Eren looked up at him silent. Argos changed the subject. "Counter the move you just made." As Eren fluidly fought against Argos, he had to admit the timing and reflexes were perfect. He suspectedly asked, "So you have learned that technique of mine?" Argos seemed quite certain of this, so he continued his questioning. "Then let me ask you one more time, who are you?" Eren lowered his head and replied, "I cannot reveal that to you, but I am not lying to you at all. Everything I say is sincere, please understand me." Argos listened while smoking. Hearing Eren's firm response, he no longer questioned his identity. Argos slightly closed his face in thought and then spoke, "Then say it. What do you want?" The next day at the arena, the referee announced, "The final match of the fighting festival in the territory of Sir Alice begins now. A once-in-a-century genius, the strongest of Alice, Knight Genius Morgan Louver." It was a tall young man with an arrogant expression. Next came the introduction for Argos. On the opposing side was an unknown individual with an unbeatable record, the dark horse of this tournament, Warrior Argos. Everyone watching the match seemed to be excited. "I've never seen a crowd this enthusiastic," a man beside them admitted. "Yes, now, old man, Argos is famous. Even famous people who hate this festival, like Lord Lawson, came to watch." As they spoke, the two turned to look at an elderly man in his 60s. Lawson's expression was somewhat subdued and indifferent. Argos looked at his opponent with a disdainful gaze. Leon, sitting in the stands, couldn't help but ask, "Is that the Argos we usually see? Why is he so calm all of a sudden? It's strange." Lindsay suspected Eren had something to do with it, so she turned to him and asked, "Did you talk to him, young Master Eren?" He didn't hide anything and admitted, yes. The other three had no idea about this. Eren reminded Leon, "You need to pay close attention to this match, Leon." He obediently replied, "Yes." Count Louver, sitting in his private seat, chuckled, "Foo-foo. Look at those fools who know nothing. Ader and Morgan's skills are at a different level. Let's show them the difference between nobility and commoners." The match between Morgan and Argos officially begins. Morgan greets, "Yesterday you bullied my little brother, old man." But instead of whining like Morgan, Argos remains calmly silent. Morgan smirks. "Are your ears failing you, old man? Listen up." He speaks in a cunning tone. "Today will be your death anniversary. Die." As soon as he finishes his sentence, a powerful aura emanates from him, almost instilling fear in those around. Eren's group is also overwhelmed by this presence. Eren furrows his brow, thinking, "That's something very few people can possess, aura. I never expected to see it in this territory." Morgan points his sword at Argos and says boldly, "This festival can only end with your death, so don't blame me. After all, that's the law." Argos ponders for a moment, then responds with a slight smile, "Is that so? That makes me happy. Because you are the one who must die, I will put an end to you without any hesitation." After speaking, an extraordinary dark aura radiated from Argos. Struck by his competitive blood, Morgan's gaze became terrifying. He swung his sword along with the aura surrounding him. Argos easily dodged and simultaneously prepared to counterattack. He aimed for Morgan's torso and struck. With one hand and additional aura, he hit Morgan's hip, creating pressure that affected his entire body. After that, both of them stood still on the arena. The spectators watched the match without daring to blink. However, both maintained their previous posture. The audience began to feel confused. What was happening? Why were they immobile? Cal Louver also lost his composure, shouting, "What are you doing? Kill him, Morgan." While the girls were surprised, Eren smiled as if he had foreseen this. Morgan's body trembled in front of Argos. Argos looked at him with disdain and said, "What did you just say, you fool?" Morgan's face turned pale, feeling as if his body were being torn apart, as he screamed, "Hey!" Morgan's wide-open eyes were suddenly torn and injured. He let out a loud shout and then coughed up blood in front of everyone. In the end, he fell down, departing from this world. Morgan died in a rather terrifying state. The faint-hearted audience was stunned by the scene. The cries of the crowd erupted after the life and death battle. Argos laughed and said, "Ha, why didn't I even bother talking to this corpse?" Before the unexpected ending of the battle, the referee announced, "Wow, the eldest son of the Alice territory, Morgan, has lost and was killed in the match. Morgan really did bite the dust in defeat, leaving this world without even closing his eyes." Eren, watching the match from above, couldn't believe her eyes. She suddenly stood up and exclaimed what just happened. He should have struck the armor, but Eren, sitting next to her, answered everyone's question. Fatal strike. Perhaps his internal organs were completely damaged. At the moment Argos delivered a palm strike to Morgan's waist, Eren said, the force from the hand surged like waves, penetrating his armor and shattering his internal organs. Seeing Morgan cough up blood so violently, the result was already apparent. Levan curiously asked, "Is that true?" Eren crossed his arms and replied, "That technique is only passed down to the holy warrior of the Turamis Temple, the highest grace." Leon was stunned, his voice slightly trembling. "The highest grace?" Then his eyes instantly lit up with admiration. "That's amazing." Eren also secretly smiled downward, thinking to himself, "That technique is something I can't even imitate."